Chapter 676. The middle-aged man's expression was extremely unsightly. When Yi Xian took out the World Prison Pagoda, he once again felt the aura of death. World Prison Pagoda. If this fifth-dimensional treasure was activated, its power would not be any lower than the limitless sword. Yi Xian stared at the middle-aged man, his expression fierce. I want to see her, do you understand? The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. You'd better not act recklessly. Yi Xian smiled malevolently. It seems that if I don't kill a few people, you guys won't give a damn about me. As his voice fell, he suddenly activated the World Prison Pagoda. In the next instant, a red light enveloped the middle-aged man. At the same time, a large blood-red character, prisoner, appeared above the middle-aged man's head. When this character appeared, the middle-aged man's expression changed. This was the first time he had been so close to death. At this time, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The old man was dressed very simply. He wore plain clothes and a pair of cloth shoes. With a head full of white hair, he looked very sage-like. The old man looked at the blood-red character, prisoner, above the middle-aged man's head and said softly, "Fifth dimensional." As he said this, he looked at Yi Xian. I'll let you see her. Hearing this, Yi Xian looked at the old man. Really? The old man nodded. Really? Yi Xian waved his right hand and the World Prison Pagoda disappeared. The blood-red character, prisoner, above the middle-aged man's head also disappeared. The middle-aged man let out a sigh of relief. In that instant he knew that if Yi Xian did not stop he would definitely die. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian, his eyes filled with dread. This Yi Xian's personal strength was not particularly monstrous, but his treasures were not ordinary. Moreover, each one was more terrifying than the last. Yi Xian looked at the old man. The old man said softly, that fifth-dimensional treasure is really extraordinary. Yi Xian said softly, what about her? The old man nodded. Follow me. As he said this, he turned and left. Yi Xian followed. Not long after, the old man brought Yi Xian to a secret room. Inside the secret chamber, the old man walked in front of a box. He opened the box and a white light floated out. Soon a person appeared in the white light. Little 7. Xiaoqi was in a cave. She sat cross-legged on the ground like she was cultivating. Yi Xian frowned. What is this place? The elder said, the Xianhuang Great World. Yi Xian said in a low voice, she wouldn't have left the divine kingdom for no reason. He was clear about 7's personality. She was a responsible person and there was no way she would leave the God Kingdom at such a time. The old man laughed. She didn't want to leave at first, but she had to go with us in the end. Yi Xian asked in a low voice, why? Because some people have already discovered her. If she doesn't go with us, your God nation will not only have to face the northern region, but the entire black-yellow great world. As he said this, he looked at Yi Xian. Especially when the two of you are in the Chaos Verse. The two of you are more special than the other. If the two of you are in the Chaos Verse, can the Chaos Verse withstand it? Yi Xian's face darkened. The old man spoke as if he and Xiaoqi were scourges. The old man said, you are her friend and you are qualified to be her friend. That is why I let you come here. However, you must understand that her identity is as special as yours. We are taking her away to protect her. As for your Chaos Verse, she can't go back for now. Yi Xian said in a low voice, will she never come back? The old man laughed, that will depend on her own will. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he asked, are you from the Taoist sect? The old man looked at Yi Xian. Little fellow, we don't want to have any entanglements with you. It's best that you don't interfere in our matters. It's for your own good. Yi Xian said, I am her friend. The old man fell silent. Yi Xian didn't say anything else. He just turned around and left. Since he knew that Xiaoqi was fine, he was relieved. He had always been very confident in Xiaoqi. If Xiaoqi hadn't taken the initiative to leave with them, then they would have definitely not taken her away by force. Since Xiaoqi had chosen to leave, she definitely had her reasons. Right when Yi Xian was about to leave, the old man suddenly said, young man. Yi Xian stopped and turned around to look at the old man. What is it? The old man fell silent for a moment and then he said, you cultivate the body as well? Yi Xian nodded. The old man smiled. We are very proficient in cultivating the body. Moreover, we have some divine techniques related to the body. Are you interested? Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he asked, Why? The old man shook his head. There's no reason. If you are interested, you can study here for a period of time. Your body will definitely undergo a qualitative transformation. Yi Xian said, I am interested. He had already seen the body of that middle-aged man. If he had such a strong body, then just thinking about it was exciting. The old man nodded. Follow me. With that, he brought Yi Xian out of the secret room. In a short while, the old man brought Yi Xian to a huge mountain that was tens of thousands of kilometers away from the city. No, it should be called a volcano. As soon as he got close to the volcano, Yi Xian felt a wave of heat. The old man brought Yi Xian to the entrance of the volcano. From his angle, the lava below was surging and the heat waves were monstrous. It was extremely terrifying. The old man pointed with his finger and a green pill flew in front of Yi Xian. Consume it. Yi Xian glanced at the green pill and he didn't think too much about it. He consumed it right away. For an expert of his level, it was impossible for the other party to poison him to death. After consuming the pill, Yi Xian instantly felt a surge of energy in his body, and this energy enveloped his entire body. At this time, the old man looked at the volcano below. Jump down. Jump down. Yi Xian looked at the old man. Jump down? The old man said indifferently, Your body is at the Emperor realm, why would you be afraid of this mere lava? Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then he leaped into the boiling lava. As soon as he entered the lava, all his clothes turned into ashes. At the same time he felt like his body was burning. That feeling wasn't particularly good, but fortunately his body was strong enough. Therefore he only felt a little uncomfortable, but it wasn't fatal. At this time the old man suddenly took out a white jade bottle. He poured it down lightly and a drop of blood-red bead fell. The moment that drop of blood-red bead fell into the lava, the entire lava boiled. At the same time, a dark red flame suddenly enveloped Yi Xian. Ah! A heart-wrenching scream suddenly resounded from the magma. It was Yi Xian's voice. Ouch! This was what Yi Xian was feeling right now. The moment he was enveloped by the crimson flames, he felt as if his entire body was being torn apart. At this moment the old man took out a black jade bottle. He poured it down and a drop of black liquid fell from the sky. The moment the black liquid entered the magma immediately exploded. At the same time, a cloud of black gas suddenly enveloped Yi Xian. Ah! Screams rang out incessantly from within the magma. The pain was unbearable. This was what Yi Xian was feeling at the moment. Only now did he realize how fragile his body was. At this moment he felt pain all over his body as if his nerves were being pricked by needles. That feeling was too terrifying. He almost jumped out a few times. But he still withstood it. He knew that this might be a good opportunity for him to improve his physical body. If he gave up on this chance, he might not have many chances like this in the future. He didn't know why the old man wanted to help him, but he didn't want to care about that. He would take the benefits first. At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared by the old man's side. It was the middle-aged man who had fought Yi Xian earlier. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian and spoke in a low voice. Elder, why are you helping him? The old man was expressionless. This person is rather special and is good friends with His Majesty. He might be of help to us in the future. The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment and said, Even so, we shouldn't use such noble king and beast blood. The old man spoke softly. His physical body has already reached the Emperor realm. Ordinary things won't be of any use to him. Since we want him to owe us a favor, we naturally have to make him owe us a bigger one. The middle-aged man nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. The old man looked at Yi Xian and spoke softly. This person's talent might be inferior to His Majesty, but his fate is extremely complicated, even more so than His Majesty. No matter what, let's make him owe us a favor first. As for the future, let's talk about it in the future. The middle-aged man nodded. This person isn't simple indeed, especially that sword technique that he created. The old man thought of the sword technique that Yi Xian had displayed earlier. The old man shook his head and smiled. He said that he created it himself. Do you believe that? The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian. Of course I don't. This fellow has a glib tongue and doesn't seem like a good person. The old man spoke softly. He's indeed quite different from other swordsmen. At this moment, the magma below suddenly boiled violently, and the red light and black gas on Yi Xian's body suddenly entered Yi Xian's body. Bang! In an instant the magma around Yi Xian vanished completely, and Yi Xian's body started to squirm. The old man spoke softly from above. As long as he can endure it, his physical body will undergo an earth-shattering transformation. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian with a trace of envy in his eyes. His bloodline has been reversed by the humanoid king's blood. This fellow is really lucky. The old man spoke softly. How much he can absorb will depend on his own fortune. At this moment, there was a sudden change below, and the blood in Yi Xian's body suddenly trembled violently. Bang! A red light suddenly shot out from Yi Xian's body towards the sky. In an instant that red light rushed into the horizon, and the entire horizon was instantly dyed blood red. The old man's face was filled with disbelief. How can this humanoid king's blood be finished? Is this bad? Yesterday's monthly votes were exceptionally few, and I couldn't help but sink into contemplation. Why is it like this? Is it because I'm handsome? The only sort. Chapter 677. Below him Yi Xian's entire body started to tremble madly as if he was having an epileptic fit. It was extremely shocking. Moreover, the blood within his body seemed to have been stimulated by something, and it flowed madly within his body. At the same time, strands of powerful bloodline energy ceaselessly stimulated his body. The old man's expression was extremely gloomy. There's something wrong with his bloodline. Bloodline. Below him Yi Xian's entire face started to warp. At this moment he still had a bit of consciousness and he felt extremely bitter in his heart. He didn't dare to rashly activate this bloodline energy because he wasn't confident in his ability to control it. But now, the bloodline energy that he'd absorbed earlier had actually tried to change his bloodline, and it had undoubtedly touched the reverse scale of his bloodline. Thus, it had erupted. He was able to sense that his bloodline was getting angry. Yi Xian was speechless to the extreme as well. A bloodline that had even become sentient. Are you trying to kill me? As he sensed that the bloodline energy was becoming more and more frenzied, Yi Xian hurriedly looked at the old man. Help me suppress my bloodline. The old man immediately jumped down and pressed his hand on Yi Xian's shoulder, and a powerful force instantly pressed down upon Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian hurriedly cooperated, and he utilized the profound energy within his body to start suppressing his bloodline. Just like that, after around 2 hours, the bloodline within Yi Xian's body gradually calmed down. The old man heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this scene. He wasn't afraid that Yi Xian's bloodline energy would harm Yi Xian, but he was afraid that Yi Xian's bloodline energy would affect Yi Xian. Because he'd sensed that Yi Xian's mind wasn't normal. Moreover, Yi Xian's body was emanating dense killing intent. He knew that if he didn't suppress Yi Xian's bloodline energy, then Yi Xian might go berserk. Once Yi Xian went berserk, he wasn't fully confident in his ability to suppress it. After all, Yi Xian had quite a few extraordinary treasures in his possession, especially the World Prison Pagoda. He was extremely fearful of it. Fortunately, Yi Xian had regained his composure. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes and they were completely blood red. The old man's expression changed when he witnessed this scene, and he became vigilant. But soon Yi Xian's eyes returned to normal. Yi Xian stood up. As soon as he stood up, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Yi Xian was stunned. Then he looked at his own body. After a while he said excitedly, "Divine Realm. Divine Realm." His body had advanced from the Emperor Realm to the God Realm. Yi Xian clenched his right hand. In an instant, a powerful force gathered on his right arm. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. His current physical defense and strength were not just a little bit stronger than before. Now he was completely confident that he could kill a deity realm expert with a single punch. Power. Yi Xian gazed at the middle-aged man who stood nearby. The middle-aged man spoke indifferently. "What? You want to fight me?" Yi Xian chuckled. "How about we spar?" He wanted to test exactly how strong his body was right now. The middle-aged man gazed at Yi Xian. "All right, but you're not allowed to use your sword." Earlier when he fought Yi Xian had used his fists and sword at the same time, and it was too annoying. Moreover, if Yi Xian were to use the executing heaven sword, then it would be even more impossible for him to fight. Yi Xian roared with laughter. "All right, we'll fight him with our fists." The middle-aged man nodded, and then he and Yi Xian arrived at an arena, and the arena was in a mess. The middle-aged man gazed at Yi Xian. Just make do with it. Yi Xian nodded. I'm making a move. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward. Bang! The space in the surroundings trembled violently. On the other hand, the middle-aged man vanished as well, and he smashed his fist towards Yi Xian. Bang! Bang! It didn't take long for numerous explosions to resound. Yi Xian didn't utilize his sword this time, so he could be said to be on par with the middle-aged man. Of course, when Yi Xian utilized the Fist of Burial, he would gain an even greater advantage. After his body attained the God rank realm, the might of his Fist of Burial had increased by at least a few times. If he didn't utilize the Fist of Burial, then he would be on par with the middle-aged man. Just like that, the two of them fought for an entire hour and they were equally matched in the end. After Yi Xian stopped, he walked over to the old man and cupped his fists. Thank you. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and then he said, there might be a huge movement in the Northern Territory soon. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. A huge movement? The old man nodded. They've failed numerous times and the Northern Territory won't allow themselves to fail again this time. Because this is their last chance. If they can't defeat all of you, then other powers will come to your chaotic universe. When he spoke up to this point, he gazed at Yi Xian. Don't underestimate the Northern Territory, especially the King of the Northern Territory. He was said to be the most monstrous genius in the history of the Northern Territory, and no one knows exactly how strong he is now. The King of the Northern Territory. Yi Xian nodded. Thank you for the reminder, Senior. The old man nodded slightly. Let's go. Yi Xian cupped his fists once more. Senior, until we meet again. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and flew off on his sword, and he vanished into the horizon in the blink of an eye. The middle-aged man by the old man's side suddenly spoke softly. Can he stop the King of the Northern Territory? The old man spoke indifferently. It'll depend on his own fortune. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. But it didn't take long for him to stop and turn around to look towards the distance. Not far away on the city wall stood a middle-aged man in a white robe. The middle-aged man gazed at the old man and grinned. You're from the Taoist sect, right? The old man glanced at the white-robed man. Fuck off. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand. Boom. Not far away, the white-robed man was sent flying thousands of feet away. At this moment, a man in black suddenly appeared behind the white-robed man. The man in black was about to make a move, but was stopped by the white-robed man. From afar, the old man's voice suddenly came. Within 3 breaths, if you're still in the city, you'll die. The white-robed man did not hesitate. Let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. In the distance, the old man spoke softly. That little guy is in danger. That's not right either. At the end of the horizon, the white-robed man stopped. He looked at the distant Thousand Opportunities city, his eyes extremely solemn. Beside him, a man in black suddenly said, This Taoist sect's people are really arrogant. The white-robed man said indifferently, They have this strength, but what makes this sovereign curious is, why did they let that Yi Xian leave the city safely? As he said this, he turned around. Have you arranged it? The man in black nodded. Yes, it's arranged. The white-robed man nodded. Let's go. With that, he turned around and left. After leaving Thousand Opportunities City, Yi Xian headed straight for the chaotic universe. The old man's words gave him a bad feeling. The black-yellow Great World's northern region must be up to something big. He had to rush back to the chaotic universe as soon as possible. Not long after, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. He frowned slightly and the surroundings were silent. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed to the side. The sword light slashed down and space was directly torn apart. At this moment, the scene in the middle of the battlefield suddenly distorted. Yi Xian was expressionless. The space doctrine suddenly appeared between his eyebrows. The next second, the distorted space around him gradually calmed down. At the moment, there were 4 men in black standing around him. Their figures were erratic and unpredictable like ghosts and spirits. Yi Xian said indifferently, Northern region? The 4 did not speak. Suddenly, the 4 of them disappeared and the space around Yi Xian was suddenly cut apart layer by layer. Yi Xian did not waste any time and smashed his fist down. Burial fist. As this fist smashed down, the surrounding space directly collapsed. On the other hand, the four men who had just approached Yi Xian were instantly blasted away. At the instant that they were blasted away, four flying swords suddenly flew out and slashed at the four men in black. Meanwhile, the four men in black suddenly vanished. Yi Xian frowned slightly. He glanced at the surroundings and then he circulated the space Dao Law. In an instant, the space around him trembled violently, and then four figures appeared around him. Yi Xian turned around and swung his sword. The head of one of the men in black flew into the air. Yi Xian turned around to look at the three men in black, and they immediately retreated explosively. Yi Xian's face was expressionless. Such weaklings. Who are you looking down on? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward. A sword howl tore through the sky. In the distance, space was directly torn apart by Yi Xian's sword. At the same time, the head of one of the men in black flew into the air, and blood sprayed out like a fountain. There were only two black-clothed men left. They were about to attack when a voice suddenly resounded from not too far away. There's no need for that. All of you aren't a match for him. Yi Xian looked over and saw a white-robed man walking over from afar. Yi Xian gazed at the white-robed man and the latter grinned. You're Yi Xian? Yi Xian suddenly vanished and then he slashed down with a raise of his sword. The white-robed man's eyes narrowed slightly and then he flicked his sleeve. Bang! The white-robed man retreated by a few meters while Yi Xian returned to where he stood earlier. At this moment, there was a deep and bloody mark on the white-robed man's right hand. The white-robed man's face instantly sank. He gazed at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly vanished. A sword howl reverberated through the sky. In the distance, the white-robed man's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly took a step forward and smashed his fist forward. This punch smashed directly onto Yi Xian's sword light. Rumble. The sword light shattered and then Yi Xian was instantly pushed over 100 m back. On the other hand, another deep and bloody mark had appeared on the white-robed man's right hand, and his bones were visible. The white-robed man's face was extremely gloomy, and there was a trace of vigilance in his eyes as he gazed at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Your sword. He'd just spoken up to hear when Yi Xian suddenly vanished and then a ray of light flashed. The white-robed man crossed his arms and used them to block Yi Xian's sword. Bang! The white-robed man was instantly pushed over 100 m back by Yi Xian's sword, and when he stopped moving, the heads of two black-clothed men in front of him had flown into the air. The white-robed man gazed at Yi Xian. Yi. He'd just spoken a single word when Yi Xian suddenly vanished again. The white-robed man's face instantly warped when he witnessed this scene. Can you let me finish? Sword strike. Bang. The white-robed man was blasted flying again. The only sword. Chapter 678. Yi Xian did not stop this time. He slashed at the white-robed man fiercely. He held the executing heaven sword in his hand. Therefore, the white-robed man did not dare to fight head-on like before. Because of this, the white-robed man retreated again and again. In the end, he retreated tens of thousands of feet. Flying swords flew around Yi Xian and the white-robed man. At this moment, the white-robed man suddenly squatted down and put his hands together. In the next moment, he suddenly jerked forward. Rumble. The surrounding space trembled. Yi Xian was directly thrown hundreds of feet away. The white-robed man stared at Yi Xian. At this moment, his expression was incomparably ferocious. I really underestimated you. I never thought that your physical body would actually... Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. A sword arrived. Boom. The white-robed man was instantly slashed and there was another deep wound on his body. The white-robed man looked up at Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him and slashed again. This time it was not the executing heaven sword but the soul-suppressing sword. This sword slash the white-robed man could not dodge at all. He could only take it head-on. He crossed his arms. Boom. The white-robed man instantly retreated hundreds of feet away. As soon as he stopped, his expression changed drastically. This was because the soul in his body was actually being torn apart. Soul tearing. The white-robed man looked at Yi Xian in horror. What are you? At this point his voice stopped abruptly. This was because Yi Xian appeared in front of him again. Yi Xian slashed down again. At this moment, the soul-suppressing sword in his hand had become the executing heaven sword. This sword slash caused the white-robed man's expression to change drastically. He was just about to attack when at this moment, the soul in his body was being torn apart. It was impossible to achieve divine soul unity. At this moment Yi Xian's sword had already slashed down. The white-robed man's body was directly cut in half by Yi Xian's sword. The white-robed man's soul was about to escape, but a mysterious force indeed locked him in place. The white-robed man glared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian directly pressed his sword against the white-robed man's soul. The white-robed man was greatly shocked because he discovered that his soul was actually starting to dissipate. Yi Xian looked at the white-robed man. Many people die because they talk too much. The white-robed man stared at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian said, I ask you answer. If you answer well I can let you live. The white-robed man looked at Yi Xian and sneered, You underestimate this sovereign too much. This sovereign. Yi Xian suddenly said, All right, I respect you. I won't ask any more. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and slashed with his sword. The white-robed man's soul was directly absorbed by soul. Yi Xian took the white-robed man's storage ring and left. But before he could take a few steps, a cold light suddenly slashed at the back of his neck. This cold light appeared without warning, and Yi Xian did not even have time to react. The cold light had just penetrated half an inch into Yi Xian's skin when Yi Xian's entire body disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared he was already hundreds of feet away, and the back of his neck was bleeding profusely. Yi Xian looked not far away and it was already empty. But he knew who it was. It was the female assassin who had once tried to assassinate him. The Heavenly Gates assassin. Yi Xian closed his eyes slightly, and the space Dao Law appeared between his brows. Soon the space within a radius of hundreds of thousands of feet suddenly trembled. A moment later Yi Xian opened his eyes and the surrounding space returned to normal. The female assassin had already left. If her attack failed she would escape thousands of miles away. This was what an assassin was like. After a moment of silence Yi Xian turned around and left. Not long after Yi Xian left, a woman in black suddenly appeared where he had been standing. This person was the Heavenly Gates assassin who had previously attacked Yi Xian. The woman was silent for a moment and just as she was about to disappear, a sword light suddenly appeared behind her. The woman's expression changed and she turned around to slash down with her saber. Boom! The woman instantly retreated hundreds of feet. The moment she retreated she wanted to hide. At this moment the space around her began to shrink layer by layer, and finally formed a spatial cage. This spatial cage directly trapped the woman. At this moment Yi Xian appeared in front of the woman. He glanced at her and said, I know how to hide as well. The woman suddenly made a move and Yi Xian blocked it with his sword. Bang! The saber in the woman's hand directly shattered, and at the same time, Yi Xian's sword directly pressed against the woman's brows. Yi Xian looked at the woman. Do you want to live? The woman was silent. Yi Xian held his sword and gently pushed it forward. The sword penetrated half an inch and in an instant, blood gushed out of the woman's brows like a fountain. Yi Xian looked at the woman expressionlessly. Seeing that you're a woman I'll ask again. Do you want to live? The woman was silent. Just as Yi Xian was about to stab his sword in, the woman suddenly said, Yes. Yi Xian was slightly startled. He didn't expect the woman to answer like that. He sheathed his sword and said, Do you know what to do? The woman looked at Yi Xian. I don't know. Yi Xian said, Follow me. The woman was silent. Yi Xian said, Hand over a wisp of your soul. The woman was still silent. Yi Xian's expression gradually turned cold. This is your last chance. The woman opened her palm and a wisp of her soul flew in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian collected the woman's soul and then looked at the woman. Apart from you, is there anyone else in the Heavenly Gate? The woman nodded. Yes. Yi Xian asked, How many? The woman shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian frowned slightly. The woman said again, I don't know. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Does the Heavenly Gate also want that treasure? The woman nodded. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Besides the Heavenly Gate, what else do you know? About me. The woman was silent for a moment and then said, The Sword Martial School is investigating you. The Sword Martial School. Yi Xian thought of the white-robed woman from before. That white-robed woman was the founder of the Sword Martial School. Did she also want that treasure? After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, "Follow me. Don't show yourself." As his voice fell, he disappeared into thin air. The woman was silent for a long time and then also disappeared. An hour later, Yi Xian returned to the chaotic universe. Inside the divine palace, Yi Xian sat quietly and in front of him was Xian. Yi Xian asked, "How is the matter in the vast universe handled?" Xian said, "It has been handled. There are many sects and powerhouses over there and we have recruited them." Yi Xian nodded. "If they don't want to come, don't force them." Xian said, "Understood." As she said, she looked at Yi Xian. "Have you become stronger again?" Yi Xian nodded. "My physical body has broken through." Xian smiled slightly. "Congratulations." Yi Xian said softly, "Tell our people to prepare, they should be making a big move." Xian hesitated and then nodded, turned around and left. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Take me to see the people of the Dao Execution Army." Xian looked at Yi Xian. "You want to transfer them?" Yi Xian nodded. Xian nodded. "Okay." Yi Xian and Xian left the main hall, and under Xian's lead, the two entered the vast starry sky. In the starry sky, Yi Xian said softly, "They are not in the chaotic universe?" Xian shook her head. "No." Yi Xian nodded and he looked up into the depths of the starry sky. He had a bad feeling. The black-yellow Great World's northern region had failed so many times, and this time the other side would not hold back. In the past it could be said that they underestimated the enemy, but now if the other side still underestimated the enemy, then they were really stupid. And he did not believe that the king of the northern region was a fool. Not long after, Yi Xian and Xian came to a continent. There were very few people on this continent and the spiritual qi was quite thin. Xian brought Yi Xian to an ancient city. Inside the ancient city, the two came to a restaurant, and next to the door of the restaurant, a man was lying. The man reeked of alcohol and his clothes were tattered. Yi Xian looked at Xian, and the latter walked in front of the man and said softly, "Yan." There was no response and the man was still sleeping. Xian looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. A ray of sword light slashed straight at the man. At this moment the man's eyes suddenly opened, and then he punched at Yi Xian's sword light. Bang! This punch forcibly blocked Yi Xian's sword light. The man looked at Yi Xian. "You are that Yi Xian?" Xian said solemnly. "Yan, he is now the king of my god nation." The man named Yan sneered. "King of god nation? Is he worthy?" Hearing this, Xian frowned. "Yan, how can you be so rude to a god master?" Yan was expressionless. "What god master is he? I only recognize god master Wu in Little Seven." Xian wanted to say something, but at this moment Yi Xian suddenly said, "There is no need to say anything." Xian looked at Yi Xian and Yi Xian said, "These members of the Dao Execution Army have their identities recorded in my god nation, right?" Xian nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian pointed at Yan, who was not far away. "From this moment on, delete him from the records." Xian was stunned. Yan looked at Yi Xian and his eyes narrowed slightly. At this moment Xian looked at Yi Xian. "God Master, this may be a bit inappropriate, Yi Xian looked at Xian. "Are you the God Master or am I the God Master?" Hearing this, Xian's face suddenly changed. She knew that the person in front of her was angry. Thinking of Nangong Wan's fate, Xian quickly bowed respectfully. This subordinate knows her mistake. Yi Xian was expressionless. "Immediately delete his record." After saying that, he turned around and left. At this moment, Na Yan suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at Yan and didn't say anything. Yan stared at Yi Xian and laughed. "Expel me from the Dao Execution Army? Are you joking? When I followed Martial God Master to slaughter Tendo at that time, your parents weren't even born yet." Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Yan's face suddenly changed and he punched out. Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. The sword fell and Yan's entire arm flew out. Blood spurted out. Na Yan was stunned. He didn't expect Yi Xian's strength to be so strong. The members of the Dao Execution Army were indeed strong, but no matter how strong they were, they couldn't be stronger than Yi Xian and Shaoqi. Yan stared at Yi Xian. "If you dare to touch me, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. A sword directly pierced Yan's forehead. Blood sprayed. Yan's eyes opened wide and they were filled with disbelief. Xian nodded slightly and her hands were trembling. Meanwhile Xian sheathed his sword, turned around and left. Yan suddenly roared, "They will take revenge for me." A strand of sword light flashed. Yan's head flew into the air. At the same time Xian's voice resounded from afar. "Notify everyone in the Dao Execution Army that anyone who doesn't listen to me, Xian, will be expelled from the Dao Execution Army. If everyone doesn't listen, then immediately disband the Dao Execution Army. If they don't obey, then they can come look for me at any time. Tell them that I'll kill as many as they come." I heard that the livestream industry is doing well recently. I want to give it a try. Perhaps I'll become a great streamer with an annual salary of tens of millions. At the same time, I want to prove to all of you that I can actually rely on my looks to make a living. The only sword. Chapter 679. Agree. Xian looked at Na Yan's head in silence. She knew that Xian was really angry. She rarely saw Xian angry. This could be said to be the first time. This time it also allowed her to understand her position and identity. She was Xian's advisor. If she publicly questioned Xian or disobeyed Xian, it would have a significant impact on Xian's prestige. Of course, it was mostly on herself. She would never forget Nangong Wan's fate. After a while Xian turned around and left. After the two returned to the divine nation, Xian took out a black ancient book. On the ancient book there were two blood-red words. Dao Execution. Xian opened the ancient book. This ancient book recorded the members of the Dao Execution Army. Looking at the names, Xian sighed softly. She knew that these people would definitely not be loyal to Xian. Because Xian's position as Divine Lord was a little abnormal. After all, Shaoqi did not personally convene the assembly to pass on the position. Moreover, Shaoqi's disappearance was somewhat inexplicable. It could be said that many people in the Divine Nation had doubts about Xian's position as Divine Lord. But she knew that without Xian's suppression, without Shaoqi, the chaotic universe could not resist the black-yellow Great World. Although the people in the Divine Nation did not dare to resist Xian, the Dao Execution Army would definitely not submit to Xian. And if the Dao Execution Army did not submit, Xian would definitely use iron blood methods to suppress them. After a while Xian sighed softly and turned around to leave. In the Divine Palace, Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, the executing heaven sword quietly floating beside him. After a long time he suddenly took out a Dao-ranked sword and began to absorb it. Now he would absorb swords whenever he had time. In terms of realm, he still needed to hurry up and reach the Emperor realm as soon as possible. Only by reaching the Emperor realm would there be a qualitative transformation. Right at this moment Yiling suddenly ran in. In the entire Divine Hall, only Yiling and Lanxiu and the others could enter without being notified. Yiling quickly walked up to Xian and said with excitement, "Brother, I've accepted some disciples today and they're all pretty good." Xian looked at Yiling and said with a smile, "Not bad. Train him well." Yiling nodded. "Big brother, I want to properly manage the Immortal Dao sect. I want it to become a very, very large sect in the Chaosverse." Xian smiled and said, "I will support you unconditionally. If you want money, look for me. If you want people, look for me. Anyway, if you need anything, look for me. Understand?" Yiling smiled sweetly. "I know." At this point she spread out her hands. "Brother, I want some divine crystals. I'm short on money." Xian laughed, and then he took out a spatial ring and gave it to Yiling. Yiling glanced at the spatial ring, and there were 2 billion divine crystals in it. Yiling hurriedly said, "Big brother, it's too much." Xian shook his head. "Take it. If it's not enough, look for me." As he spoke, he hesitated for a moment, and then he took out another spatial ring and gave it to Yiling. "There are some Dao realm treasures in here. Take them and put them in the Immortal Dao sect. As a large sect, it can't be lacking in necessary treasures." Yiling thought for a moment and then she nodded. She put the spatial ring away and looked at Xian. "Big brother." Xian smiled and said, "What's wrong?" Yiling hesitated for a moment and then she said, "I heard that the profoundness world." Xian stood up and rubbed Yiling's little head lightly and then he said, "Don't think about all that. Big brother is here. Big brother will take care of everything, understand? Yiling looked at Yi Xian while she clenched her little fists tightly. Big brother, I'm very good at fighting as well. Yi Xian roared with laughter. Alright, I'll definitely bring you along when we fight. Yiling looked Yi Xian in the eye. Definitely. Yi Xian said seriously, definitely. Yiling smiled brilliantly and then she turned around and left. As he gazed at Yiling's figure in the distance, Yi Xian's brows gradually furrowed. The profoundness world. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian was about to leave. Meanwhile, a woman walked in. It was Xianxia. She had been managing the sword sect in Wuhan in Divine Martial City. She was once a palace lord and a marshal, so she was very good at management. Xianxia walked over to Yi Xian and she sized up Yi Xian. How strong are you? Yi Xian smiled. Very strong. Xianxia shook her head. I can't catch up to you. Yi Xian said softly, I was forced to. He was forced out. Since Qingqing until now his enemies had basically never stopped. Wherever he went there would be new and powerful enemies. And now there was the profoundness world. And it wasn't just the Xuanhuan world. There might be even more powerful people. They were endless. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. At this moment Xianxia said, Why did you call me here? Yi Xian recollected his thoughts and said seriously, You should know that I am the divine nation's divine lord. I don't have a trusted follower by my side, so I asked for your help. Xianxia frowned. Don't you have that Xianxia? Yi Xian shook his head. She's not bad, but her heart isn't completely on my side. Xianxia nodded slightly. I understand. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian. What position do you want? Yi Xian smiled. What position do you want? Xianxia shook her head. You give it to me. Yi Xian nodded. From now on you can represent me completely. As he said this, he took out a token and gave it to Xianxia. This is the Divine Lord token. Seeing it is the same as seeing the person. Xianxia said solemnly, What if someone isn't satisfied? Yi Xian suddenly said, Come out. As soon as he said this, a black-clothed woman appeared not far behind Xianxia. Yi Xian said, She is under your command now. Not only that, but you can also mobilize the dark guards. Xianxia glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. I understand. As she said this, she turned and left. When she walked out of the door, she saw Xianxia. Seeing Xianxia was slightly taken aback. You are? Xianxia smiled. Xianxia. From now on I will be by his side and be responsible for some of his matters. Please give me some pointers in the future. Hearing this, Xianxia's expression stiffened slightly, but she quickly recovered. She nodded. Welcome, Miss Jiang. Xianxia nodded. I still have things to do. Let's talk later. As she said this, she walked out. Xianxia was silent for a moment, and then she walked into the hall. She walked in front of Yi Xian and bowed slightly. I have informed all the members of the Dao execution army, but no one responded. They might, Yi Xian said softly, have Yan Dao and Zhen Guandao as well as Xiang Yu be ready to listen to my orders at any time. Xianxia smiled bitterly. Do we really have to go this far? As she said this, she lowered her head slightly. I have no other intentions, nor am I siding with them. It's just that this army was created by the War God Lord. These people have made great contributions to the Divine Kingdom. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. These people are no longer under our control. I don't care who they are loyal to. I am now the ruler of the Divine Kingdom. Since they are not loyal to me, I naturally have the right to expel them from the Divine Kingdom. Speaking up to here, he got up and walked in front of Xianxia. These people think that they are the most elite warriors of the Divine Kingdom, so they are arrogant and do not put me in their eyes. Since that is the case, why should I respect them? As he said this, he walked to the entrance of the hall and said softly, I don't want to be the ruler of the Divine Kingdom, but since Little Seven wants me to be the ruler, then I will be the ruler. I will also lead everyone in the chaotic universe to fight against the chaotic universe. Since I have chosen to be the ruler, then I will not allow anyone in the chaotic universe to challenge my authority. Whoever dares to challenge me will die. Yi Xian didn't want to be the ruler of the chaotic universe, but he understood one thing very well. In front of a great enemy there could be no internal strife. If there was, then it must be eliminated immediately. Moreover, no one could challenge his authority. Otherwise he would not be able to convince the people of the world. Behind Yi Xian, Xian glanced at him and didn't say anything. She was a smart person and knew what Yi Xian was thinking. After a moment of silence, Xian said softly, "I saw the 9th young lady just now." Yi Xian nodded. "I asked her to come and help me." Xian lowered her head slightly. "Do you need me to leave?" Yi Xian shook his head. "No need. You continue to do what you are doing, but in the future she will be the leader. Her words are my words." Xian nodded. Understood. She knew that her position had changed from the first to the second. However, this was already the best result. As long as she didn't completely lose this position, the Shangguan family wouldn't decline because she was still by Yi Xian's side and was still in the inner circle of power. It was just that this power might become less and less in the future. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Miss Shangguan, during this time, you have helped me a lot, but you may not be so clear about your own position, so I need someone of my own to help me. Of course, you can rest assured that you are still you. You are still the same as before, but I hope you understand one thing, and this is also the last time I will tell you. In the future, my orders cannot be disobeyed, especially in front of others. Do you understand?" Xian nodded slightly. "I understand." Yi Xian nodded. "You may leave." Xian bowed slightly, turned around and left. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. He took out a Dao realm sword and was about to devour it, but at this moment, a powerful aura suddenly came from the sky outside the palace. An enemy attack? Yi Xian frowned slightly. In the next moment he was already outside the palace. Above the palace, a man fell straight down. The man carried an extremely powerful force. At this moment, Yan Dao suddenly appeared in front of the man and pulled out his saber. Boom! The man was forced to stop. At this moment 12 people appeared behind the man. These 12 people were all at the peak of the god state and their auras were extremely powerful. Yan Dao looked at the man and the others and frowned slightly. "You are," the man in the lead sneered. "What? You don't even recognize our Dao execution army?" Dao execution army. Hearing this, Yan Dao's face sank. At this moment, the man suddenly looked at Yi Xian and pointed at Yi Xian angrily. "This person killed my Dao execution army. How can he be the God Lord? He deserves to die." Chapter 680. Yan Dao's face darkened when he heard the man's words. He didn't expect these people to cause trouble for Yi Xian. Yi Xian. Yan Dao's expression darkened. He knew Yi Xian's temper. His temper was definitely more violent than Shao Qi's. Moreover, once he became ruthless, he would do anything. In the distance, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He didn't expect these people to really come for him and kill him. At this time, many divine nation powerhouses had appeared. The Dark Guards and the Xinwu army had gathered behind Yi Xian. The man in front of Yi Xian looked coldly at Yan Dao and the Xinwu army. "We are the Dao execution army personally appointed by the martial divine lord. How dare you act rashly in front of us?" The Dao execution army. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings instantly changed when they heard this. This army could be said to be the most mysterious and powerful army in the divine nation. Most importantly, it was an army personally created by the divine nation's founder, Wu Anning. At this time, Xian walked to Yi Xian's side and whispered, "The Dao execution army has 3 great privileges. First, you don't have to kneel before future divine lords. Second, you don't have to be controlled by anyone except the divine lord. Third, if future divine lords are heartless, the Dao execution army can come out and kill them." 3 great privileges, Yi Xian said in a low voice. "This martial godmaster has given them a lot of power." Xian nodded. "They are very powerful." Yi Xian smiled. "They are against me now. What do you think I should do?" Xian's expression changed. She knew that God Yi was taking the initiative to kill them. Xian lowered her head slightly. "You must have a reasonable reason. I know you don't care about these things, but the divine nation does. Even if you want to kill them, you must have a reason that everyone in the world believes. These people have extremely special identities. You must not kill them. Otherwise, the people of the divine nation will be in danger and even cause panic within the divine nation." Then she looked at Yi Xian. "Violence cannot solve all problems. It will even cause more problems in the divine nation." Yi Xian smiled and said, All right. Then I'll reason with them first. I'm a very reasonable person. Pass down my order, let all the officials come here. Xianxia glanced at Zhou Xian and then quietly retreated. Not long after, all the officials of God Nation arrived at the scene. When they found out that the Dao execution army had appeared, these people were originally very happy because what God Nation currently lacked the most were experts. However, their hearts instantly sank when they found out that the Dao execution army had come to look for trouble with Zhou Xian. Was there going to be a civil war in the Divine Kingdom? The ministers of the Divine Kingdom were very worried. When he saw all the officials arrive here, Zhou Xian gazed at the man who led the Dao punishment army and he said with a smile, "All of you came here today to kill me?" The man looked at Zhou Xian. "You killed someone from my Dao execution army. What right do you have to be a godlord?" Zhou Xian smiled, then looked at the divine image who was extremely prestigious in the God Nation. "Elder One, do you think I came to the position of divine master in the right way?" Everyone looked at Elder One. Elder One wasn't very strong, but his prestige in the God Nation was extremely high. Moreover, he had disciples all over the world. So he could be said to represent all the scholars in the world. Elder One fell silent for a short moment before he said, "His Majesty was personally taught by His Majesty Little Qi, so he naturally came to the position in the right way." He was very clearly aware that if he questioned Zhou Xian now, then God Nation would instantly collapse. Now it lacked an extraordinary expert, and Zhou Xian didn't lack a God Nation. God Nation would instantly collapse without Zhou Xian, but nothing would happen to Zhou Xian if he lost the God Nation. Perhaps it would even be much easier for him. God Nation couldn't lose Zhou Xian. Most importantly, Zhou Xian's position as Divine Master was personally taught by Little Qi, so it was perfectly justifiable. Zhou Xian smiled. "Elder One, then tell me, can I mobilize the Dao execution army?" Elder One bowed slightly. "Of course. As a Divine Master, His Majesty has the right to mobilize any army in God Nation. Even though the Dao execution army is special, it's beneath a Divine Master and not beyond him, so it doesn't have the right to question a Divine Master. Of course, if a Divine Master is heartless, then the Dao execution army naturally has the right to depose a Divine Master. However, when he spoke up to this point, he gazed at Zhou Xian. His Majesty hasn't done anything heartless since he ascended to the throne. On the contrary, he's even subdued the entire universe and established a new territory for God Nation. I'll be the first to object if anyone dares to question his position. We object as well." Meanwhile, the officials behind Elder One spoke in unison. Many of them were from clans and they'd benefited the most from Zhou Xian since he'd subdued the entire universe. Because they'd absorbed too many geniuses from the universe. Moreover, even though the spirit energy in the universe was thin, it was still sufficient for them to develop for a very long time. Most importantly, Zhou Xian's strength. The members of the Dao execution army might not have a clear understanding of Zhou Xian's strength, but they were. Now Zhou Xian was the strongest person in the entire chaotic universe. Without Zhou Xian, how could the chaotic universe resist the black-yellow great world? Their heads. It could be said that everyone's interest had been tied to Zhou Xian unknowingly. Without Zhou Xian, if the black-yellow great world attacked, everyone would be finished. Seeing that everyone was supporting Zhou Xian, the face of the man leading the Dao execution army immediately became unsightly. Zhou Xian looked at the man and smiled. "You said that I killed Yen." As he spoke, he looked at Xianxia. "Miss Xianguan, tell me, why did I kill Yen?" Xianxia said, "Yen despised His Majesty and spoke disrespectfully. Moreover, he attacked first." Zhou Xian smiled slightly, then looked at Elder One. "Elder One, the Dao execution army is special, but can they be disrespectful to a Divine Master?" Elder One's face was gloomy. "They're special, but they're still citizens of the Divine Kingdom. What right do they have to be disrespectful to a Divine Master?" As he spoke, he gazed at the Dao execution army. "Have all of you forgotten your original intentions? Your duty is to protect the Divine Kingdom, not to stand above it." The man had a rather ferocious expression on his face. Protect the Divine Kingdom? If such a person becomes a Divine Master, then it's fine if the Divine Kingdom isn't protected. Elder One was infuriated. How presumptuous! Where are the Imperial Guards? As soon as Elder Wen's voice resounded, the guards suddenly surrounded the group of 10+ people. At the same time, the Divine Martial Army moved out as well and they surrounded those people. The man glanced at the surroundings and grinned fiercely. You think all of you can resist us? At this moment Yi Xian, who was not far away, suddenly disappeared. The moment he disappeared, the man's expression changed drastically, and he punched forward with both fists. A ray of light flashed. The man's hands were chopped off by Yi Xian's sword. At the same time, Yi Xian's sword was pressed against the center of the man's forehead. The surroundings were extremely silent. Yi Xian gazed at the man. If I wasn't the Divine Kingdom's Divine Master and didn't consider all of your merits from all those years ago, then I would have fucking ended all of you by now. As he spoke, he glanced at the others behind the man. What's your duty? It's to protect the Divine Kingdom. Are all of you protecting the Divine Kingdom right now? The man in front of Yi Xian was just about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly raised his sword and thrust it forward. The sword stabbed half an inch into the man. His blood sprayed out. Yi Xian gazed at the man. Did I allow you to speak? The man laughed fiercely. A soldier can be killed but not humiliated. If you have the ability. Yi Xian raised his hand and swung. The man's head instantly flew into the air. The surroundings fell silent. The members of the Dao Execution Army gazed at Yi Xian with eyes that were filled with fear. At this moment, they finally realized that this newly appointed Divine Master's strength was actually so terrifying. Yi Xian glanced at them. All of you have two choices now. The first is to stay in the Divine Kingdom. The second is to leave the Divine Kingdom. Of course, if you choose to leave, then all of your names will be removed from the Divine Kingdom from this moment onward. All of you will no longer be members of the Divine Kingdom, and you will no longer receive any special treatment. Their expressions instantly became unsightly when they heard this. Special treatment. All of them received the salary of the Divine Kingdom every single year, and they even received quite a lot. It could be said that their formidable combat strength was completely fostered by the Divine Kingdom. If they didn't have the support of the Divine Kingdom's resources, then they could only go work. Of course, with their strength, there would be people who wanted them no matter where they went. However, the treatment they received would definitely not be as good as the Divine Kingdom. Moreover, they were members of the Divine Kingdom and possessed respected statuses in the Divine Kingdom. If they left, then everything would be gone. Now Yi Xian wanted them to make a choice. Suddenly, a voice resounded from the side. Are you driving us out? Yi Xian turned around and looked over. Not far away, a middle-aged man walked over slowly. Beside Yi Xian, Xianxia said in a low voice, Commander of the Dao Execution Army Han Qi. The main character had arrived. Yi Xian looked at Han Qi and said with a smile, Didn't I give you two choices? Han Qi walked to a place not far away from Yi Xian and he looked at Yi Xian. His Majesty Shao Qi disappeared mysteriously, and your position as Divine Master came mysteriously as well. What's wrong with us questioning you? Is there a problem? Yi Xian smiled and said, Do I need your approval to be the Divine Master? As he spoke, his smile gradually turned cold. Do I need your approval? As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward swiftly and slashed down with his sword in both hands. His space was instantly sliced apart by him. Han Qi's eyes instantly narrowed slightly when he saw Yi Xian's sword, and there was a serious look in his eyes. He opened his palm and a golden truncheon suddenly appeared in his hand. He held the truncheon in his hand and fiercely slashed forward. Boom! A powerful force suddenly erupted in front of the two of them, and Han Qi instantly retreated nearly 100 feet away, while Yi Xian did not retreat even half a step. As soon as Han Qi stopped, the golden mace in his hand cracked. Seeing this scene, Han Qi's face instantly darkened. This golden mace was bestowed to him by Wu Anning, but now, it was actually cracked by Yi Xian's sword. In the distance, just as Yi Xian was about to make another move, Han Qi's face changed, and he suddenly raised the golden mace with both hands. Martial Divine Master, please. Boom. The golden mace suddenly erupted with a golden light, and in the next moment, a woman condensed within the golden light. P.S. I said I wanted to be a broadcaster. Someone said I was an egg biluo? The person who said this, do you dare to report your address? For the first time I felt a great humiliation. You can scold me for not updating enough, you can scold me for being weak, you can scold me for being shameless, but please don't insult my looks. Thank you. Chapter 681. Wu Anning. Everyone looked at the woman, and it didn't take long for her appearance to become clearer. In the end, all the experts here knelt on one knee and said in unison, "Greetings, Divine Lord Marshal Wu Anning, the first Divine Lord of the Divine Kingdom and the founder of the Divine Kingdom." He possessed supreme authority in the Divine Kingdom. The members of the Dao Execution Army knelt on one knee as well when they saw Wu Anning, "Greetings, Divine Lord." Even Han Qi immediately knelt on one knee, "Greetings, Divine Lord." The only person here who didn't kneel was Zhou Xian. Wu Anning wore a white robe with his hands behind his back, and there was a red dot between his brows. He emanated an overbearing, imposing aura that looked down upon the world. After Wu Anning made an appearance, her gaze descended onto Zhou Xian. "You're the current Divine Lord?" Zhou Xian nodded, "Yes." Wu Anning's face was expressionless. "Then why don't you kneel when you see me?" Zhou Xian smiled. "Why should I kneel? How presumptuous." Han Qi suddenly shouted furiously from nearby, "Zhou Xian, how dare you be disrespectful to the Divine Lord Marshal?" Zhou Xian looked at Han Qi. "I advise you to shut up." Han Qi was just about to speak when Wu Anning suddenly looked at him. "Is this how you treat the Divine Lords of the Divine Kingdom?" Hearing this, Han Qi's expression changed and he immediately lowered his head. "This subordinate wouldn't dare, nor have I ever disrespected any other Divine Master. It's just that this Zhou Xian killed members of my Dao Execution Army and even wanted to drive us away. Thus, this subordinate had no choice but to ask for the Divine Master's help." Wu Anning looked at Zhou Xian. "Why did you kill the Dao Execution Army?" Zhou Xian smiled. "Because they didn't listen to my orders and looked down on me." Wu Anning frowned slightly when she heard this and she looked at Han Qi. The latter hurriedly said, "It was Zhou Xian who obtained the position of Divine Lord improperly. The previous Divine Lord, Shao Qi, vanished inexplicably, and then he ascended to the position. This matter is truly too strange." At this moment, Elder Wen suddenly walked out and bowed slightly to Wu Anning. "Your Majesty, what he said is completely absurd. Divine Lord Yi obtaining the position of Divine Lord is justifiable, and it is precisely because of him that our Divine Kingdom can resist the Black-Yellow Great World." As he spoke, he looked towards Han Qi. "Commander Han has summoned Your Majesty to appear this time for his own selfish reasons. Your Majesty, please understand." Han Qi's expression changed and was just about to speak when Wu Anning suddenly said, "Shut up." Han Qi's expression instantly changed drastically when he heard this, and he hurriedly knelt down. This time he didn't kneel on one knee but on both knees. Moreover, his body was even trembling. Wu Anning looked at Zhou Xian. "Let's go somewhere else." TT ant to be ant and had TT for Wu Wu to be Wu Tess and the Marshal of Ant Elder Wen and the others had stood up, but Han Qi and the others didn't dare stand up. "Wu TT, ant, T T Teet." TT Zhou Xian nodded. Wu Anning sized up Zhou Xian. "You're a little special." Zhou Xian did not reply. Wu Anning asked softly, "Has the Xuanhuan Great World discovered this place?" Zhou Xian nodded. "Senior, you also know of the Black-Yellow Great World?" Wu Anning nodded. "I know." As she spoke, she glanced downwards, then shook her head. "The Chaos Verse cannot fight against them." Zhou Xian said, "I know." Wu Anning looked at Zhou Xian. "What are your plans?" Zhou Xian smiled and said, "What else can I do? Of course it was to fight with them. After all, even if we surrender, nothing good will come out of it." At this point, he suddenly looked at Wu Anning. "Senior, why don't you come back and become the Divine Master yourself?" Wu Anning shook his head. "I can't come back." Zhou Xian asked, "Why?" Wu Anning said, "It's a long story." As she spoke, she looked at Zhou Xian. "That girl called Little Seven, is she in danger?" Zhou Xian shook his head. "I came into contact with those people who brought her along. They did not harm Little Seven. However, Little Seven's identity is quite special," Wu Anning said softly. "Her background is indeed very special." As she spoke, she looked at Zhou Xian. "You are also special." Zhou Xian said, "Senior, I can't handle it alone." "Are you sure you won't come back?" Wu Anning shook her head. "It's not that I don't want to, but I can't." As she spoke, she waved her right hand. She appeared in front of the temple with Zhou Xian again. Everyone looked at Wu Anning. Wu Anning looked at Zhou Xian. "From this moment on, he is our Divine Kingdom's Divine Master. No one is allowed to question his identity." As she said this, she pointed with her finger. A ball of white light floated into Yi Xian's brow. Use this item at the crucial moment. Yi Xian was stunned and then he nodded his head. Wu Anning looked at Han Qi. Do you think you are special? Han Qi's face instantly turned ashen white. He hurriedly said, Your Majesty, I know my mistake. Wu Anning kept silent for a moment and then said, Since you have done well, I won't take your life. However, your heart is already broken and I can't let you stay here. From now on, leave the God Kingdom and never come back. If you have any other thoughts after you leave, I will kill you in the future. When he heard this, Han Qi sat down paralyzed. He hurriedly said, Your Majesty, I know my mistake. I am willing to be loyal to God Lord Yi. I won't dare to have any other thoughts. When he saw these scenes, Yi Xian was filled with emotions. Han Qi's strength was at least half a step to end realm, but he was so respectful towards Wu Anning. This respect wasn't fake. One could imagine how holy Wu Anning was in the hearts of the people of the God Kingdom. Wu Anning looked at Han Qi and the others with a complicated gaze. These people had once followed her through life and death. After a moment of silence, Wu Anning looked towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, If you want to stay you can. However, you have to listen to my orders. Han Qi hurriedly bowed respectfully towards Yi Xian. I definitely won't dare to have any other thoughts. Yi Xian looked towards Wu Anning. Is he trustworthy? Wu Anning nodded her head. They have all followed me through life and death and can be trusted. Moreover, with your strength, apart from that little brat, no one in the God Kingdom can hurt you. As she said this, she looked towards Han Qi. With his strength, even 10 of you won't be his match. Don't do stupid things. Otherwise, you won't have a second chance. Do you understand? Han Qi bowed respectfully. I understand. Wu Anning nodded her head. She glanced at the surroundings with a complicated gaze. Finally, she looked at Yi Xian. Protect this universe well. As her voice faded, her body gradually turned illusory. At this moment, all the people of the God Kingdom present knelt on one knee. Farewell, Martial God Master. Wu Anning completely disappeared. In the field, Han Qi walked towards Yi Xian and knelt on one knee. Greetings, Divine Master. Behind him, those members of the Dao Execution Army also hurriedly walked over and knelt on one knee. Loyalty. The current them didn't dare to have any other thoughts. Firstly, Yi Xian's strength was there for all to see. Secondly, Yi Xian obtained Wu Anning's personal acknowledgement. It could be said that no one dared to question Yi Xian's authority now. Yi Xian looked towards Han Qi. How many people does the Dao Execution Army have? Han Qi said in a deep voice, 26 people. Most of them are at the God realm and their combat strength is extraordinary. Yi Xian nodded. Let all of them come to the God Kingdom. Han Qi nodded. They were just half a step away from the Saint Realm. Emperor Realm wasn't far away. Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and then looked towards Xian. She said softly, We have gathered all the powers in the vast universe. Just the vast universe alone has gathered 39 Emperor Realm experts. Along with our God Kingdom, we have many Emperor Realm experts. However, we have less than 12 God Realm experts. As for End Realm experts, we don't have a single one. End Realm experts. Yi Xian kept silent. Be it the vast universe or chaotic universe, there were no End Realm experts. One could say that if they went up against Shenhuang Great World, the chaotic universe would definitely be at a disadvantage. Yi Xian nodded. I know. Xianxia bowed slightly and then said, We have prepared some super formations in our God Kingdom and can activate them at any moment. Yi Xian nodded. How are the people? Xianxia said, Unity. Our God Kingdom has always been united. No one has fled or caused chaos. Yi Xian nodded slightly. There is no need to plot against them and tell them everything. There is only one path in front of us. No one has any other path. We can only fight to the death. Xianxia nodded. Understood. Lady Jiang and I will deal with all these matters. Yi Xian said, Also, let the people from God Martial City come here. Xianxia said, Lady and brought Wu Yuan and Sword Sect disciples to Order City yesterday. They are in the city now waiting for your Majesty's orders. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at that moment, Tianji sect leader suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian. They are here. They were here. Chapter 682. They were here. Yi Xian naturally knew who was coming. The people from the black-yellow great world were here. Yi Xian nodded. I will go. Tell our people to prepare. Xianxia hurriedly said, No. With that she stood in front of Yi Xian. You can't have any accidents. Yi Xian smiled. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Xianxia still wanted to say something, but at this time, a voice came from the side. Let him go. Xianxia turned to look, and the one who spoke was Jiangjiu. Jiangjiu looked at Xianxia and smiled. If he can't beat them, he will run. Run. Yi Xian laughed, and he was about to leave when Jiangjiu suddenly said, We will wait for you. Yi Xian nodded. Wait for me. As his voice fell, he suddenly turned into a sword light and soared into the sky, disappearing at the end of the horizon in the blink of an eye. There was still some worry in Xianxia's eyes. At this time Jiangjiu suddenly smiled. Don't worry, he will definitely protect himself. Because his sister is here. Xianxia looked at Jiangjiu. Sister? Jiangjiu nodded and said softly, Crazy sister protector, sister. In the entire country of Jiang, almost no one did not know to what extent Yi Xian protected his sister. Touching him might not necessarily be a problem, but touching Yiling would definitely result in death. And Yiling being here proved that he would definitely come back. Xianxia looked up at the sky and said softly, This time can we survive? Jiangjiu was silent. Black-yellow great world. This was a super powerful world in the four-dimensional universe. Whether it was the experts or the martial arts civilization, it was far superior to the chaotic universe. Could the chaotic universe survive? No one knew. Yi Xian entered the vast starry sky. He flew on his sword, his speed increasing to the extreme. The northern region had come. And he wanted to see how many people came from the northern region and how strong these people were. Once he only had his sister by his side. But now he had many more responsibilities. Divine martial city, sword sect, divine nation. Once the swordsman's sword was bound, it would slow down. But in his opinion, responsibility was not a restraint. If a person couldn't even bear his own responsibility, could he still be called a man? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He sped up. About 4 hours later, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. Not far in front of him was the black-yellow Great World Space Base that he and Xiaoqi had visited for the first time. Not far in front of him there was a huge starship floating in the air. This starship was several times larger than his Imperial starship. The entire starship traveled across half of the starry sky. On this starship stood a group of soldiers wearing golden armor and holding golden spears. There were tens of thousands of them. These soldiers stood there in an orderly manner, giving off an unstoppable feeling. A true master of hundreds of battles. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian knew that the northern region was serious. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in front of the huge starship. As soon as he appeared, nearly 100 auras suddenly locked onto him. Yi Xian laughed. I am Yi Xian, the divine nation's master. I've long heard that the northern region has many monsters. Today I've come to challenge them. I wonder if anyone wants to fight. As soon as the voice fell, a man in white suddenly appeared in front of him. The man in white looked at Yi Xian. You're Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the man in white and smiled. You've heard of me? The man in white was expressionless. I heard that you refused the northern region's invitation. Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The man in white chuckled. I have to say you're very courageous but also very stupid. Yi Xian suddenly said, You're representing the northern region? The man in white nodded. Yes. Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. The man in white's expression changed. A spear suddenly appeared in his hand. The next moment he stabbed forward. The spear was like a thunderclap. As Yi Xian's sword slashed down, the spear instantly exploded. Seeing this scene, the man in white's expression changed dramatically. He retreated rapidly. Yi Xian's sword was even faster. A flying sword directly appeared in front of the man in white. The latter was shocked and hurriedly dodged to the side. But it was still a little too late. His entire right arm was sent flying. After the man in white stopped, he looked at Yi Xian. Your sword. Before he finished speaking, a flying sword suddenly pierced through the space between his eyebrows. Blood splattered. The man in white's aura instantly disappeared. His eyes were still filled with disbelief. He didn't think that he would die so quickly. Yi Xian was expressionless. He looked at the huge ship in the distance. Show me something powerful. The huge ship didn't respond. Yi Xian said with a smile, is there no one else? At this moment, a white light suddenly flew out from the huge ship. The next moment, a woman in white landed in front of Yi Xian. The woman in white was dressed in white. She was tall and slender. Her face was exquisite. She was a rare beauty. The woman in white glanced at Yi Xian. Just as she was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly rushed forward and slashed down with his sword with both hands. Seeing Yi Xian's sudden attack, the woman in white's expression changed drastically. She flicked her sleeve and a ribbon floated out. This ribbon almost instantly tied up Yi Xian. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. What the hell is this? Without thinking, he slashed with his sword. The ribbon instantly broke into countless pieces and splattered in all directions. The woman in white who wanted to follow up with another attack was directly slashed back by a sword light. As soon as she stopped, Yi Xian suddenly appeared above her. The next moment, a sword light slashed down at her face. Everywhere the sword passed, space was torn apart like fragile paper. The woman in white's pupils constricted. She suddenly opened her hands and countless ribbons shot into the sky. These ribbons instantly wrapped around Yi Xian. However, in the blink of an eye, the ribbons were directly slashed into pieces by Yi Xian's executing heaven sword. Meanwhile, the woman in white had retreated to the huge ship. She fled. The woman in white looked at Yi Xian with fear in her eyes. At this moment, there were no less than a dozen bloody marks on her body. She glanced at the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand. Do you dare to put down this sword and fight me fairly? Yi Xian glanced at the woman in white. Sure. However, you have to suppress your cultivation level. Suppress it to the same level as me, the supreme realm. How about that? The woman in white's expression instantly became unsightly when she heard this. A mocking smile appeared on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. He ignored the woman in white, put away his sword and looked at the huge ship. Can't you send someone with a little intelligence? Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded from the huge ship. Kid, how arrogant. As soon as the voice resounded, a middle-aged man suddenly flew out. At the same time, a spear shot explosively towards Yi Xian like a bolt of lightning. Everywhere the spear passed, space was actually incinerated. It was an extremely shocking sight. Yi Xian opened his palm and then the executing heaven sword flew forward. A ray of light flashed through the surroundings. The spear in midair was instantly slashed into two by the executing heaven sword. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly vanished. In the next moment he'd arrived in front of the middle-aged man, and then he suddenly smashed his fist down towards the middle-aged man. The fist of burial. As soon as his fist descended, the space in an area of over 100 kilometers instantly cracked apart. Rumble. On the other hand, the middle-aged man was blasted back onto the huge ship by Yi Xian's punch. He just stopped moving when blood sprayed from the corner of his mouth like a fountain. It was an extremely shocking sight. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian, who stood above them. Yi Xian's strength had slightly exceeded their expectations. Yi Xian looked down with an emotionless expression. Too weak. Give me someone who can fight. The middle-aged man gazed at Yi Xian with deep fear in his eyes. Only now did he realize that this divine leader's strength was actually so terrifying. He didn't attack again because he would only be asking to be humiliated if he did. Especially when Yi Xian was in possession of that sword. Yi Xian was practically a semi-invincible existence. Because there weren't any treasures that could resist Yi Xian's executing heaven sword for now. Yi Xian looked down coldly. What? Is there no one else? Right at this moment, an ethereal man in a luxurious robe suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The man had long hair that hung loosely on his shoulders, and he had a scholarly bearing. Everyone on the huge ship instantly knelt down on one knee when they saw the ethereal man. Greetings, King. King. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Needless to say, this man in the luxurious robe was the Black-Yellow Great World's king of the northern region. Had the main character finally appeared? Yi Xian looked at the man in the luxurious robe, and the man in the luxurious robe looked back at him. Yi Xian gripped the executing heaven sword tightly in his right hand and remained silent. The man in the luxurious robe sized up Yi Xian and nodded slightly. Not bad indeed. No wonder this king's subordinates have died time and time again. As he spoke, he glanced behind Yi Xian and said softly, "The chaotic universe. The spiritual qi is indeed abundant." Yi Xian looked at the man in the luxurious robe. "This is not your main body." The king of the northern region looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "You want to kill me?" Yi Xian held the executing heaven sword in his right hand and said nothing. The king of the northern region suddenly shook his head and smiled, naive. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. "I know you have a trump card, but you don't know the difference between us. Perhaps in the future your achievements will not be lower than this king's, but right now, you are no match for this king at all. Do you believe that?" Yi Xian smiled. "All I know is that you have to give it a try. What if you win?" "Huh." The king of the northern region suddenly laughed. "Win? You are so naive. Yi Xian, this king asks you, how will your chaotic universe fight against the northern region?" Yi Xian smiled. "I will die if I fight and I will die if I don't. Why shouldn't I fight? What do you think?" The king of the northern region looked at Yi Xian. "This king once gave you the choice to live, but you gave it up." Yi Xian dusted off the dust on his chest and smiled. "I would rather die standing than live kneeling." The king of the northern region nodded slightly. "You have the pride of a swordsman. Not bad." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. "Don't worry, when we get rid of the person behind you, you will be able to die standing as you wish." Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. "The person behind me." The king of the northern region smiled. "Isn't it the woman in the plain dress behind you?" Yi Xian's face darkened. "You are targeting her." The king of the northern region said softly, "If she is not dead, I will not be able to rest easy." Yi Xian suddenly said fiercely, "I will bear the consequences of my own actions. If you have the ability, come and find me. Why are you going after her? This has nothing to do with her, so don't go after her. If you want to go after her, go after me. P.S. I am going to Beijing on the 8th of this month to participate in the online literature conference. Are there any friends from Beijing? We can exchange some ideas then. For the record, don't come if you have a sexual orientation. Chapter 683. The Northern Region King looked at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, you actually want us to go find her, right?" Yi Xian's expression calmed down. "Guess." The Northern Region King smiled. "It seems that you are very confident in her strength. Unfortunately, you underestimate me in the Northern Region." Yi Xian shook his head. "I didn't underestimate you. Really. I also know that you are much stronger than I imagined. But," saying this, he looked at the Northern Region King. "What I don't understand is, why are you targeting her? Isn't your goal the fifth-dimensional treasure and the chaotic universe?" This was what he didn't understand. Why were you targeting the plain-dressed woman? The Northern Region King looked at Yi Xian. "Don't you understand? You're not a threat to us, but the people behind you are. Do you understand?" Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I'm no threat? Why are you looking down on me?" The Northern Region King looked at Yi Xian. "Your threat is in the future, but the woman behind you is in the present." Yi Xian looked at the Northern Region King. "Do you know how strong she is?" The Northern Region King smiled. "Do you know how strong we are?" Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Good luck." Saying this, he turned and left. The Northern Region King suddenly said, "Yi Xian, you know nothing about the strength of the black-yellow great world. It won't be long before you realize how ignorant and laughable your resistance is." Yi Xian stopped and said softly, "Do your best." Saying this, he disappeared into the distance. Behind Yi Xian, the Northern Region King said softly, "Pass down my order. Everyone is to gather in the chaotic universe." Saying this, he turned and left. Soon the giant ship began to move forward. Its destination was the chaotic universe. At the end of the distant starry sky, Yi Xian stopped and slowly closed his eyes. "Miss Ayu, how strong was that person just now?" A moment later, Ayu said, "Not someone you can fight." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Compared to that plain-dressed woman?" Ayu fell silent. Yi Xian frowned slightly. "What? Is she stronger than the plainly dressed woman?" Ayu suddenly said, "Why are you comparing him to that woman in a plain dress? How could they be compared? That plain-dressed woman is already invincible, okay?" "Invincible?" Yi Xian's expression froze. "This invincible?" Ayu said calmly, "She might not be number one, but at least in the fourth dimension no one can defeat her. Yi Xian said solemnly, "Is he that strong?" Yu spoke indifferently, "She's not strong, she's invincible and unreasonable invincible." Yi Xian was speechless. Yu asked again, "They are going to look for her?" Yi Xian nodded. "The northern region king thinks that she's a bigger threat, so he wants to deal with her first before dealing with me." Yu was silent for a moment, then said, "Are all the people in the fourth dimension so stupid?" Yi Xian was speechless. Yu said again, "Isn't it good to be alive? Why do they have to look for her? That woman's emotions are unstable, one wrong move and their Xianhuang great world will disappear completely. I don't understand, can't they just deal with you? You're so weak now, if they want to deal with you you most likely won't be able to resist. But they just have to look for that woman saying something about getting rid of future troubles. They are getting rid of future troubles for you." Green City Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors. Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as crown prince will be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. "Why?" At this moment, a timid voice suddenly rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the crown prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. "This is a matter of the clan, why are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time the new crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning." The Great Elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young master, Yi Lang inherits the title of crown prince. What are you shouting about?" As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded, "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince I'll need 10 guards. From now on you'll be my guard." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. "I'll go through fire and water for the crown prince and I'll risk my life for you." Yi Lang nodded, "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Within the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The Great Elder's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yilang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yiling did not stop and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yilang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yiling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yiling bowed to everyone in the hall as she asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yiling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave. Yiling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan and it is unknown whether he is dead or alive. Yet the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he is fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, Young master, Yi Lang inherits the prince's position. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yiling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard quickly bowed. This subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. From now on you will be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded. Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Do not show mercy, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu saw something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe and the robe was tattered and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Zhou Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Zhou Xian, Yilang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Zhou Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Zhou Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yilang and was about to speak, when Zhou Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Zhou Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt his head spin and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, "Zhou Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Zhou Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly, while Zhou Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Zhou Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Zhou Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Zhou Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Zhou Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping! Chapter 684. The Divine Strategy Sect. The Divine Strategy Sect was one of the more mysterious sects in the northern region. The sect answered only to the northern region king and could be considered the intelligence department of the northern region. This sect was rather famous in the entire Xianhuang Great World. There was a saying in the northern region, "There is nothing the northern region king doesn't know." After the northern region king gave the order, the entire Divine Strategy Sect became busy. There was a huge altar in the back mountain of the Divine Strategy Sect. It was nearly 300 meters wide and had all kinds of strange black talismans drawn on it. At the same time, there was a portrait floating in the middle of the altar. The portrait of a woman in a plain dress. At that moment, 4 black-robed men and an old man stood around the altar. The old man was the sect master of the Divine Strategy Sect, Songgu. Songgu closed his eyes as if he was waiting for something. Just like that, about 2 hours later, when the sun was high in the sky, Songgu suddenly opened his eyes. Blood sacrifice. As soon as he said that, a lot of blood appeared on the huge altar. In the surroundings, the runes on the altar suddenly trembled. Songgu began to chant something and the entire altar trembled more and more. After a long time, Songgu suddenly looked up at the sky and said softly, "After her." As soon as he said that, the altar shook violently and a ball of red light suddenly wrapped around the portrait of the woman in a plain dress. The surrounding space began to distort. At that moment, the northern region king had already entered the ancient city. The inside of the city was empty and desolate. The northern region king came to the center of the city and saw a man lying in front of the city lord's mansion. The man's hair was disheveled and his face was dirty. His clothes were so black that his original appearance could not be seen and his body exuded a foul stench. Before the northern region king came, this man was the only living person in the city. The northern region king walked in front of the man and said softly, "Night King, aren't you going to welcome an old friend?" The man did not reply. The northern region king opened his palm and a red bead suddenly appeared in his palm. There was a woman lying in the red bead. At that moment, the man lying on the ground in the distance suddenly sat up and stared at the bead in the northern region king's hand. The northern region king said, "Her soul has been stored in a soul bead and is still being nurtured. If we have another soul treasure to suppress her soul, it will not be difficult to resurrect her." The man looked at the northern region king with killing intent in his eyes. The northern region king smiled and said, "Can you kill me?" The man slowly closed his eyes. "What do you want me to do?" The northern region king said, "What do you want me to do?" The man looked at the king of the northern region. "If you can't kill him, I can't either." The night king frowned and said, "Who do you want to kill?" The night king frowned and said, "Who do you want to kill?" The king of the northern region whispered, "A sword cultivator. Swordsman." The king of kings said, "King of kings said." King of Northern region, king of king of north of. The king of was king of king. King. Kings king of said king of king of king. The northern region king thought for a moment and pointed. The red bead floated in front of the night king. The night king held the red bead in his hand and his whole body trembled. The northern region king said, in the chaotic universe, there is a person called Zhou Xian. He has a treasure that can suppress souls. However, you cannot touch him now. I need him to lure the swordsman out. The night king did not answer the northern region king. He looked at the red bead in his hand in a daze. The northern region king did not say anything else and turned to leave. After the northern region king left, the night king sat on the ground and muttered, I'm sorry. Outside the city, the northern region king shook his head and said, lovers are the most pitiful. At that moment, a little girl appeared beside the northern region king. She was about 11 or 12 years old and looked very similar to the northern region king. The little girl looked at the city and asked, Father, who is this night king? The northern region king smiled and said, he was once as famous as me. The little girl frowned and said, what right does he have to be as famous as father? The northern region king shook his head and said, Zhen, don't underestimate the people of the world. As he said this, he looked up at the sky and said, in the vast universe there are many people with special talents. Even I am not the best in this four-dimensional universe. Do you understand? Zhen nodded and said, I understand. The northern region king smiled and said, you are talented. The only pity is that you have lived too peacefully under my protection. You do not have the murderous aura and ruthlessness of Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian. Zhen frowned and said, you mean the Zhou Xian from the chaotic universe? The northern region king nodded and said, he is a very talented person. No, his talent is secondary. His character is what I value the most. This person has come all the way from the small world. He is not simple. Zhen said in a low voice, but he does not know how to appreciate kindness. Father wanted to take him as a son, but he refused. The northern region king smiled and said, because of this, I admire him even more. Zhen looked at the northern region king and asked, why? The northern region king said softly, unyielding character. More and more people don't care about it now. Zhen hesitated and said, although father admires him, you will still kill him, right? The northern region king nodded and said, yes. Zhen asked again, why? The northern region king smiled and said, we are enemies because we have different standpoints. He wants to protect the chaotic universe and I want the northern region to become better. I'm not wrong and he is not wrong either. Do you understand? Zhen shook his head and said, I don't really understand. The northern region king smiled and said, then you just need to remember one thing. He is our enemy. After saying this, he took Zhen's hand and said, let's go and see another old man who has not appeared for a long time. This old man is also a swordsman. Soon, the two disappeared into the distant starry sky. 2 hours later, the northern region king and Zhen came to a dense forest. Just as they arrived, an illusory sword suddenly appeared in front of the northern region king and Zhen. The northern region king smiled and said, old man, is this how you welcome me? At this moment, an old man appeared in front of the northern region king. The old man wore a plain robe and had a head full of white hair. He held a sword in his hand. The northern region king said softly, long time no see. The old man glanced at Zhen, who was beside the northern region king. Your daughter? The northern region king nodded and looked at Zhen. Greet Grandpa Lin. Zhen hurriedly bowed and said, Grandpa Lin. The old man pointed and a small sword appeared in front of Zhen. It was very small, but it was crystal blue and very beautiful. Zhen did not hide his joy. The northern region king laughed and said, hurry up and thank Grandpa Lin. Zhen hurriedly said, thank Grandpa Lin. The northern region king gently rubbed Zhen's head and said, go and play. Zhen was very sensible and immediately retreated. The northern region king and the old man walked into the depths of the bamboo forest. On the way, the old man said, I heard that the matter in the chaotic universe is not easy to deal with. The northern region king nodded. There is a swordsman whose power is unfathomable. The old man frowned slightly. Unfathomable. The northern region king smiled. For now it is unfathomable. The old man asked, how strong is she? The Northern Region King said softly, "She used a sword to kill my Generalissimo from countless galaxies away. What do you think?" Hearing this, the old man frowned. "She hasn't appeared in her true body?" The Northern Region King shook his head. "Not yet." The old man fell silent. The Northern Region King smiled. "I would like to ask you to lend me a hand." The old man said softly, "I'm afraid she is not easy to deal with." The Northern Region King nodded. "She is not a simple character. However, I must take over the chaotic universe and I must obtain the item on Zhou Xian." The old man said in a low voice, "Why not target Zhou Xian directly?" The Northern Region King shook his head. "A super swordsman secretly seeking revenge. My northern region will not be able to withstand it. So we must deal with her first. As for that Zhou Xian, he is not a threat at the moment." The old man nodded. If that super swordsman wanted to take revenge on the northern region at all costs, the northern region would definitely suffer. However, if she did not fight to the death and ran away then came back to fight again, she might even drag the northern region down. This was also the reason why the Northern Region King had temporarily given up on targeting Zhou Xian. Once Zhou Xian was dead, the Northern Region King would have nothing to worry about. Now that Zhou Xian was alive, the Northern Region King could use Zhou Xian to restrain the swordsman, making the Northern Region King hesitate. The old man looked at the Northern Region King. "Let's go." The Northern Region King smiled. "You agree just like that?" The old man said softly, "My swordsmanship has reached a bottleneck. If I don't have an opportunity, I won't be able to advance any further. For me, seeing another powerful swordsman might be an opportunity." The Northern Region King nodded. "Then let's go. It should be about time." With that, the two turned and disappeared. In the chaotic universe. At this moment, 3 giant warships suddenly appeared in the chaotic universe. The 3 warships spanned across the entire universe. On each warship, there were tens of thousands of powerful soldiers from the northern region. These soldiers could be said to be the true elites of the northern region. But this time, the Divine Kingdom did not have an advantage in terms of both quantity and quality. In the starry sky, Xianxia looked at the 3 warships in the distance. She frowned, her eyes full of worry. It could be said that this was the greatest crisis the Divine Kingdom had ever faced. If they lost this battle, forget about the Divine Kingdom. The entire chaotic universe would disappear without a trace. Could the Divine Kingdom stop them? The worry in Xianxia's eyes grew stronger. At this moment, a man suddenly appeared in front of Xianxia. The man was Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian looked at the 3 warships in the distance and said softly, "Don't panic." Xianxia looked at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian smiled. "You see, I'm not panicking at all. I even want to laugh." Xianxia was about to speak when a starship suddenly flew over from the right. Soon the starship stopped in front of Zhou Xian. On the starship, a woman in a white dress walked out. She looked at Zhou Xian and smiled. "Your Excellency, are you Zhou Xian?" Zhou Xian nodded. "Yes." The woman in the white dress smiled. "You're the one who destroyed the Prairie Fire sect?" Zhou Xian narrowed his eyes. "You're from the Sword Martial sect." The woman in the white dress nodded. "I heard that my sect's founder's sword is in your hands?" Zhou Xian looked at the executing heaven sword in his hand. "Why?" The woman in the white dress looked at Zhou Xian and smiled. "Please return it." At this moment, the executing heaven sword suddenly trembled violently. "P.S. There are a few days every month when I don't want to write. I just want to sleep until I wake up naturally. But I'm poor. If one day I also start to stop writing, then please congratulate me, because at that time I may not be poor anymore." Chapter 685. Return the Executing Heaven Sword. Zhou Xian was taken aback. He hadn't expected the Sword Martial sect to ask him to return the sword. Zhou Xian looked at the trembling Executing Heaven Sword in his hand. "What do you think?" He naturally respected the Executing Heaven Sword's opinion. He didn't want to force the Executing Heaven Sword to do anything to him. Xiaoling suddenly said, "It's said to cut her." Zhou Xian was speechless. The Executing Heaven Sword trembled, and a sword will slashed at the woman in white. The woman in white frowned. With a wave of her sleeve, the sword will was immediately forced to a stop. Zhou Xian understood the Executing Heaven Sword's intention. Zhou Xian looked at the woman in white. This sword doesn't seem willing to go with you. The woman in white looked at Yi Xian. It belongs to the sword martial sect. Yi Xian waved the executing heaven sword in his hand. I don't think the words sword martial sect are written on it. The woman in white smiled. Looks like you don't want to return it. Yi Xian looked at the woman in white. I think you don't just want the sword, right? The woman in white smiled. You're smart. Yi Xian suddenly raised his hand and swung his sword. The woman in white narrowed her eyes and punched. Rumble. The space around them trembled. The woman in white retreated hundreds of meters and Yi Xian also retreated dozens of meters. As soon as the woman in white stopped, her fist cracked and blood spurted out. Yi Xian glanced at the woman in white. Get lost. The woman in white looked at Yi Xian. She didn't say anything. Suddenly she disappeared. In an instant, 4 flying swords appeared around Yi Xian. Yi Xian frowned. He raised his hand and swung his sword. Boom. The 4 flying swords were shattered by his sword. At this time, the woman in white suddenly appeared in front of him and punched at his head. Yi Xian didn't dodge. He punched with his left hand. Boom. In the blink of an eye, the white-dressed woman retreated another 1,000 feet. After the lady in the white dress stopped, she stared at Yi Xian. God's state physical body. Yi Xian looked at the woman in the white dress. He didn't say anything and disappeared. The woman in the white dress narrowed her eyes. With a soft cry, she slammed her palm forward. Boom. A powerful force swept out from her palm. However, as Yi Xian's sword slashed over, her power was instantly shattered. The white-dressed woman's pupils constricted. She tapped her right foot lightly and instantly retreated thousands of feet. As soon as she stopped, a flying sword appeared in front of her without warning. At this moment, a sword suddenly appeared in the white-dressed woman's hand. She raised her hand and stabbed. Boom. The flying sword was sent flying by her strike. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of her, and at the same time, a sword was slashing towards her. The white-dressed woman's expression changed drastically. She was unable to dodge at all, so she could only block with her sword. Yi Xian's sword fell. Clang. The sound of something breaking resounded while the white-dressed woman appeared over 1 kilometer away. However, her entire right arm had vanished. She stared fixedly at Yi Xian. You've actually cultivated both the sword and martial arts to such an extent. You. Yi Xian suddenly said, cut the crap. I'm fucking fighting you, not talking about feelings. As soon as he finished speaking, he was already in front of the white-dressed woman, and the latter's pupils constricted to the size of needles. His sword descended. The white-dressed woman was instantly slashed into 2 by Yi Xian. Blood sprayed and it was an extremely bloody scene. Yi Xian turned around to look at the starship that the white-dressed woman was on. Don't send such a weak one. Thank you. Meanwhile, a voice resounded from within the starship. We underestimated you. Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously. Underestimated? I've fucking killed so many people from the north, yet all of you still underestimate me? Did your brains get eaten by dogs? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slashed down with his sword. A ray of light shot forward. Meanwhile, a figure suddenly flew out from within the starship. Bang! Yi Xian's ray of light was instantly blasted into pieces, and then Yi Xian suddenly vanished. At the same time, a furious shout resounded like a thunderclap. Flash! As soon as the voice resounded, a sword howl reverberated through the sky. Bang! The figure was blasted back by Yi Xian's attack, but he hadn't even stopped moving when Yi Xian suddenly charged swiftly over to him, and then he slashed down forcefully with his sword. Flash! The execution heaven sword descended. Space was fragile like paper and it was instantly torn apart. The expression of the man in front of Yi Xian changed when he sensed the energy contained within Yi Xian's sword. He flipped his right hand and a golden shield suddenly appeared there. In the next moment he held the shield in his right hand and pushed it forward. In an instant, a strand of golden light surged out from within the shield. Yi Xian's sword descended. Bang! The golden light was instantly blasted apart, and so was the golden shield in the man's hand. Bang! The man was also instantly sent flying. This time he was sent flying thousands of feet away. However, he hadn't even stopped when Yi Xian suddenly vanished. The man's expression changed when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly moved 3 kilometers back in order to increase the distance between him and Yi Xian. Yi Xian immediately stopped when he noticed that the man refused to fight, and then he glanced at the man. Fuck off. The man stared fixedly at Yi Xian and said, Yi Xian, do you know that my sword martial school? Yi Xian suddenly pointed a finger at the man and said, I don't fucking know that your sword martial school is. Cut the crap. Either kill me or fuck off right now. Don't fucking waste your breath on me. I'm not interested in fighting a war of words with you. The man's expression was extremely unsightly. How dare you look down on my sword martial school? You. Yi Xian suddenly spoke furiously, how dare you still waste your breath? I'll fucking kill you. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure vanished. A ray of sword light flashed through the battlefield. The man's expression changed drastically and without hesitation he turned around and ran. His speed was very fast and in the blink of an eye he disappeared into the horizon. Yi Xian looked at the horizon and there a voice slowly came, Yi Xian, my sword martial school will destroy you. Yi Xian's expression was cold. What a piece of trash. At this time Xianxia walked to Yi Xian's side and whispered, why are you so angry? Angry? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. He was naturally angry. There was no end to these people. But he was very clear that the northern region and the sword martial school would not be the last. In the future there would definitely be more people and more forces coming to find him. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian grinned. If I don't die, I'll definitely go to the black-yellow great world and turn it upside down. After saying that he turned around and left. Xianxia glanced at Yi Xian. She knew that Yi Xian couldn't stand the repeated harassment from these fellows from the black-yellow great world. The Divine Hall. Yi Xian sat on the throne and all the experts of the Divine Nation were below him. All the top experts of the Divine Nation were here. Yi Xian glanced at them and said, all of you should be aware of what we're facing now. I won't hide it from all of you. Our strength is inferior to the northern region, and it can even be said that there's a huge gap between us. As for the king of the northern region, I've met him once and he's very strong. As for how many other experts there are in the northern region, I don't know. Can be said that our chances of winning are very slim. All of them fell silent. Yi Xian stood up, but we have no choice. Of course, none of you here are weak and the northern region will definitely not refuse if you choose to surrender. Now anyone who wants to leave can leave and I won't stop you. All of them glanced at each other when they heard this. Surrender? Actually, many of them had such thoughts. Because after they witnessed the true strength of the northern region, none of them felt that the chaotic universe could go against the northern region. It was impossible because the gap in strength was too huge. When Yi Xian saw that no one moved, he said, I won't stop those who leave now, but I'll definitely kill anyone who dares to surrender when the two armies enter into battle. Meanwhile, an old man walked forward and he bowed slightly to Yi Xian, Divine Master. My Green Mountain sect wishes to leave. However, we won't surrender to the northern region. We just want to leave this place. Yi Xian's face was expressionless. Permitted. The old man was delighted when he heard this and he hurriedly said, Thank you, Divine Master. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Meanwhile, a dark guard appeared in front of the old man. Yi Xian waved his right hand and the dark guard vanished. The sect master of Green Mountain sect instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this, and then he quickly vanished from the hall. Seeing that the Zhongshan sect lord had left safely, the hall was silent for a moment before another middle-aged man walked out. The middle-aged man bowed to Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, You don't have to say anything. Leave. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian before he left. Just like that, it didn't take long for over 20 people to leave the hall, and all of them represented over 20 top-rate powers. Even though some had left, there were still quite a few who stayed behind. Meanwhile, Elder One suddenly walked over to Yi Xian and cupped his fists. Divine Master, letting them leave like this will probably affect their morale. Moreover, they've received a favor from the Divine Kingdom. Now that the Divine Kingdom is in trouble, they have the responsibility to resist the Black Origin world with us. Yi Xian smiled. Isn't it better for them to leave now? Elder One looked at Yi Xian and Yi Xian said softly, If they leave now, I won't be stabbed in the back by them. If they don't leave and we fight the Black Origin world in the future, these people may take our lives. As he spoke, he turned to look at Xianxia. Remember all the sects and powers that choose to leave. Xian nodded. I already have them in my heart. Yi Xian nodded. He walked to the door of the hall and looked up at the horizon. At the horizon, in the starry sky, a middle-aged man was looking down at him. The king of the northern region. This time it wasn't a clone but his main body. The main body had arrived. Everyone was looking at the king of the northern region. The king of the northern region looked at Yi Xian and smiled. You said you'd rather die standing than live kneeling. Don't worry, you'll get what you want. As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed his right hand down lightly. In an instant, countless black airflows floated down from the chaotic universe. As these black airflows appeared, the spiritual energy of the chaotic universe immediately dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye. Everyone's expressions changed drastically when they sensed this scene. At this moment, a woman suddenly appeared in the air. Chapter 686. The newcomer was none other than Tendo. The Heaven Origin World's plundering of the chaotic universe's energy had undoubtedly harmed Tendo the most. Because she was a spirit of the chaotic universe, and the energy of the chaotic universe was her foundation. Tendo's expression gradually turned ferocious as she gazed at the Northern Territory King. It didn't take long for countless strands of energy to converge towards her. The Northern Territory King gazed at Tendo and chuckled. A puny Tendo isn't qualified to attack me. He waved his right hand as soon as he finished speaking. Bang! A powerful aura swept towards Tendo. Tendo roared furiously, and then she pressed her palms together and pressed them forward. Rumble! A wave of spiritual energy surged towards the Northern Region King's aura. However, as soon as the two collided, the Heavenly Tao's spiritual energy instantly shattered. At the same time, the Heavenly Tao was forced back nearly 10,000 feet. The Northern Territory King glanced at Tendo and then he flicked his sleeve. Bang! The space here instantly became illusory. In the distance, Tiandao's pupils suddenly shrank. This power was so strong that it was not something she could resist. And at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of her. Yi Xian unsheathed his sword and slashed. A strand of sword light flashed through the battlefield. In the distance, the pressure released by the Northern Region King was directly split into two by Yi Xian's sword. But Yi Xian and Tiandao were forced to retreat again and again. This time the two retreated another 10,000 feet. The experts of the Divine Kingdoms had unsightly expressions on their faces when they witnessed this scene. The Northern Territory King glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. Even in the Heaven Origin world, there aren't more than 10 people in the younger generation who can withstand an attack from me. Yi Xian smiled. Looks like you're determined to win this time. The Northern Territory King nodded. I'm determined to win. This is my last chance. If I fail, then my Northern Territory will lose the chaotic universe for good. Yi Xian said softly. So you're saying that some other organizations are eyeing our Chaosverse as well? The king of the Northern region laughed. Yes, because there are too many tempting things here. However, this area was discovered by the Northern region, so we have the right to choose first. Yi Xian glanced around. The black energy streams were still furiously devouring the spiritual energy of the Chaosverse. Yi Xian looked at the Tendo. Is there any way to stop it? Tendo shook his head. There's no other way. Yi Xian fell silent. At this time, a Yu's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. You can stop it. Yi Xian was taken aback. I can? How do we stop it? Yu said, activate the spatial Tao law and let it absorb these things. Yi Xian asked, can I? Yu said, won't you know if you try? When he heard this, Yi Xian hurriedly activated the spatial Tao law. Soon, countless cracks appeared in the space around them, and the black spiritual energy that permeated the surroundings was directly absorbed into these cracks. Opposite Yi Xian, the king of the northern region frowned. This is the spatial Tao law. Yi Xian looked at the king of the northern region. You know the spatial Tao law. The king of the northern region glanced at Yi Xian, and his gaze gradually became slightly solemn. This isn't the fourth-dimensional Tao law, but the fifth-dimensional Tao law. At this point, his expression became even more solemn. It seems that this king has still underestimated you. Yi Xian looked at the king of the northern region and asked inwardly, Mrs. Yu, can you beat this fellow? Yu said, no. Yi Xian was taken aback and then he said, Mrs. Yu, you're from the fifth dimension. Yu said indifferently, Does the fifth dimension represent invincibility? Yi Xian was speechless. Yu said again, this person in front of you is stronger than you think. The fellow on the 6th floor should be able to deal with this person in front of you. However, he seems to be in a deep sleep. Deep sleep? Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Why is he in a deep sleep? Yu said, who knows? Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, a white light suddenly appeared in the distant sky, and the white light shot over like a meteor. The king of the northern region glanced at the white light and did not say anything. Soon the white light landed in front of Yi Xian. When the white light dissipated, a young man in his 20s appeared. He stood ramrod straight and held a spear in his hand. Seeing this young man, the king of the northern region frowned slightly. He did not know this young man. The young man's gaze fell on Yi Xian. You're Yi Xian. Yi Xian said with a smile. Who are you? The young man did not answer Yi Xian. He looked at the king of the northern region and bowed slightly. This humble one is Wang Feng of the Sword Martial Sect. Greetings, senior. The Sword Martial Sect. The king of the northern region sized Wang Feng up. Your Sword Martial Sect seems to have broken the rules. Wang Feng bowed again. This junior has come here to fight with Yi Xian. Nothing else. Fight with Yi Xian. The king of the northern region smiled. Are you sure? Wang Feng nodded. Yes. The king of the northern region nodded. Then fight with him. Wang Feng bowed respectfully. He turned to look at Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian. Please enlighten me. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly dashed forward and thrust his sword and spear forward. The spear pierced through heaven and earth like a bolt of lightning. Yi Xian did not let his guard down. He tapped his right foot lightly and gathered the power of the earth around him. The next moment he slashed with his sword. There was no technique involved. It was just a simple sword strike. The sword descended. Boom. Wang Feng's spear instantly exploded, and Wang Feng was forced back several hundred meters. However, Yi Xian was also forced back several hundred meters. Wang Feng looked down at his own palm. It had been completely shattered. After a moment of silence, he looked up at the nearby executioner heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand. That sword of yours is quite powerful. Yi Xian said calmly. Are you trying to accuse me of using my sword to bully others? Wang Feng looked at Yi Xian. That sword of yours belongs to the founder of the Sword Martial Sect. Yi Xian laughed. Are you joking with me? Wang Feng looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, I heard that you were the #1 swordsman of the Chaosverse back in the Shenhuang world. Could it be that you relied on this sword to become the #1 swordsman? Yi Xian smiled. What realm are you at now? Wang Feng said, the peak of the immortal realm. Yi Xian nodded. I'm only at the peerless realm. I'm still far from your realm. How about this? I won't use this sword and you suppress your realm to the peerless realm. We'll have a fair fight. What do you think? Wang Feng's expression turned ugly. How can you only be at the peerless realm? Yi Xian smiled. If you don't believe me, you can ask the king of the northern region next to you. Wang Feng looked at the king of the northern region. The latter said calmly, he is indeed at the peerless realm. He's several realms below you. Wang Feng's expression turned even uglier. Yi Xian smiled. What do you think? I won't use this divine weapon. You suppress your realm. We'll have a fair fight. No one will bully the other. Wang Feng stared at Yi Xian without saying anything. Yi Xian suddenly sneered. What? You don't want a fair fight? As soon as he finished speaking, he dashed out. Swish. A sword light tore through space. Wang Feng's expression changed drastically. He suddenly pointed his finger forward like a spear. Boom. A powerful spear aura exploded from his fingertip. However, as Yi Xian's sword slashed down, his spear aura disappeared without a trace. At the same time, his entire palm was cut off by Yi Xian's sword. Wang Feng was shocked and retreated nearly 1,000 feet. Yi Xian did not chase after him. He glanced at Wang Feng. If I'm not wrong, you came by yourself, right? Wang Feng looked at Yi Xian with an extremely gloomy expression. Yi Xian said calmly, Scram. Wang Feng looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, do you dare to put down the sword in your hand and fight me? Yi Xian smiled. Do you dare to suppress your realm? Wang Feng gazed silently at Yi Xian. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. What the hell? So the fairness you speak of is me sacrificing my advantage to be strong against you? How can you be so shameless? Wang Feng was about to speak when the Northern Region King spoke abruptly. Don't embarrass your sword martial school. Wang Feng gazed at the Northern Region King. Senior. The Northern Region King shook his head. Send the #1 genius of your sword martial school. Perhaps he might be able to fight him. Wang Feng fell silent for a moment and then he gazed at Yi Xian. I can't accept losing to you. Yi Xian suddenly vanished. This time he didn't use his sword and he just punched Wang Feng. Burial fist. As soon as this punch was launched, the space in an area of over 100 kilometers instantly collapsed. Wang Feng's expression instantly changed when he sensed the formidable strength contained within Yi Xian's punch. He stomped his right foot on the ground, and then an illusory spear suddenly shot out from the center of his forehead. Rumble. An explosion instantly resounded in the starry sky, and then Wang Feng's figure was blasted flying. As he flew, his body started to crack inch by inch. When Wang Feng finally stopped, only his soul was left. Wang Feng gazed at Yi Xian with slight disbelief. What sort of fist technique is that? Yi Xian spoke indifferently. I created it myself, burial fist. Wang Feng's expression suddenly became slightly ferocious. Created it yourself? How could that be possible? How could you have possibly created such a formidable fist technique? Yi Xian's face was emotionless. I'm an extraordinary genius. I can't do it. Wang Feng stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, don't get arrogant. My sword martial school. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly raised his sword. Soul-suppressing sword. In an instant, soul-suppressing sword entered the center of Wang Feng's forehead. Wang Feng's eyes opened wide and his soul grew more and more illusory. It didn't take long for him to vanish completely. Yi Xian gazed at the Northern Region King. The Northern Region King spoke softly. He died a little unwillingly. Yi Xian smiled. Are all the younger generation of the Sky-Earth world so brainless? The Northern Region King shook his head. He was about to speak but he suddenly turned around. Meanwhile, a voice resounded in front of him. I found her. The Northern Region King's eyes narrowed slightly. He fell silent for a moment before he said, Tell her to come here. Tell her that if she doesn't come, then Yi Xian will definitely die today. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. It's Chinese Valentine's Day today. I'm a little busy. A few dates. How annoying. Chapter 687. At this moment Yi Xian finally understood. The reason the Northern Region King hadn't made a move against him was because he wanted to use Xianxia to draw the woman out. When he thought up to here, Yi Xian couldn't help but laugh bitterly. It seems like I've been constantly causing trouble for the woman. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly asked softly, Miss Yu, why has she been constantly helping me? Yu fell silent. Yi Xian laughed bitterly. You don't know? Yu said, your relationship with her might not be simple. Relationship? Yi Xian frowned slightly, but I've never met her in the past. Yu said, I'm talking about my previous life. My previous life? Yi Xian was stunned. A short moment later Yi Xian laughed bitterly as well. Because he couldn't think of any other reason besides that. My previous life? Yi Xian's brows knit together even more tightly. What sort of person was I in my previous life? Yu continued, you can ask her when you see her later. Obviously, Yu was curious about Yi Xian's past life as well. It was utterly impossible for an expert like the woman to help Yi Xian for no reason. So there was only a single explanation why she cared so much about Yi Xian. And it was that she was definitely related to Yi Xian's past life. Yi Xian nodded. I'll have to ask her when I see her later. As he spoke he looked up into the sky. Meanwhile, an enormous screen of light had appeared in front of the Northern Region King, and there was a boundless starry sky within the screen. The scene within the screen of light was still changing, and it seemed to be searching for the woman in a simple dress. Yi Xian gazed at the screen with slight anticipation. He hadn't expected that he would be able to see the woman again so soon. The Northern Region King was gazing at the screen of light as well, and his expression was very calm. Right at this moment, a woman in a simple dress appeared within the screen of light. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings became solemn when they saw this woman in a plain dress. The experts of the divine kingdom were naturally no strangers to the plain-dressed woman. She hadn't even appeared in the Chaosverse that day. She had been able to insta-kill 2 supreme experts of the north from countless stellar regions away. Just how strong was this plainly dressed woman? This was what everyone was thinking at this moment. At this moment, the woman in the plain dress was not walking. She was sitting in the starry sky with a chessboard placed before her. The woman in the plain dress held the white one. Everyone in the surroundings was looking at the woman in a simple dress. The woman in the plain dress just sat there. Her dress was spotless and her long hair was draped behind her. The tail of her hair was tied by a ribbon and swayed gently in the wind. Her appearance was peerless. All along, everyone's attention had been focused on the strength of the plain-clothed woman and neglected her beauty. In fact, her beauty was also very high and could be said to be rare in the world. Of course, the most important thing was her temperament. She sat there without saying a word, and there was an indescribable and special temperament about her. At this moment, the woman in the plain dress suddenly picked up a chess piece and placed it on the chessboard. As soon as she placed it down, a black chess piece suddenly appeared on the chessboard. A game of chess. The king of the northern region gazed at the woman in the plain dress silently. A middle-aged man and an old swordsman stood by his side. They were the Night King and Elder Lin. Both of them were looking at the woman in the plain dress with solemn expressions in their eyes. Within the prison pagoda, Yu and Xianxia were looking at the woman in the plain dress as well. Yu said solemnly, "What is she doing?" Xianxia replied, "Playing chess." Yu asked, "I mean, who is playing chess with her?" Xianxia shook his head. Yu looked at the woman in the plain dress and spoke solemnly, "If such a figure exists in the 4th dimension, then the 5th dimension." Xianxia fell silent. Yu continued, "I think that the core of all this might be Zhou Xian. That fellow is very unusual." Xianxia looked at it. Yu said solemnly, "I have a feeling that something is against that kid, and that woman in the plain dress is helping that guy block a disaster, a great disaster." Xianxia nodded. "He is indeed not simple." Yu looked outside and said softly, "Forget about him. Anyway, the more special he is, the better it is for us. If he is not special, we won't be able to suppress this broken pagoda in the future." Xianxia smiled. "I think this broken pagoda is still okay now." Yu said softly, "Have you forgotten what it used to look like?" Hearing this, Xianxia fell silent. The prison pagoda in the past was not a normal kind of madness. Thinking of this, Xianxia said softly, "I hope that Xiao Ta does not truly regain his consciousness." Outside the prison pagoda, in the light screen, the woman in the plain dress was still playing chess. The king of the northern region looked at the woman in the plain dress. "Are you going to ignore us?" The woman did not reply. The king of the northern region smiled. "It seems that you do not care about this Zhou Xian's life." Zhou Xian. The woman in the plain dress who was about to place a chess piece paused. She turned her head and looked in the direction where the king of the northern region and the others were. The woman in the plain dress looked at the king of the northern region indifferently. "Are you threatening me?" The king of the northern region smiled. "Yes." The woman in the plain dress stood up and looked at the king of the northern region. The king of the northern region looked at the woman in the plain dress. "Please come out and fight." Fight. The woman in the plain dress suddenly looked at Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian lowered his head slightly. "Sorry, I caused you trouble again." The woman in the plain dress looked at Zhou Xian. "This is not trouble. These people are weaker than ants. They are not qualified to cause me trouble." Hearing this, the king of the northern region narrowed his eyes. "Weaker than ants? I have to say, this is the funniest joke I have ever heard in my life." The woman in the plain dress ignored the king of the northern region. She looked at Zhou Xian and said softly, "I really hope that you can face everything by yourself, but I know that you who have that pagoda are destined to face many things that you should not face at your age." Zhou Xian smiled bitterly. "There are a lot of enemies and they are getting stronger." The woman in the plain dress smiled. Seeing her smile, Zhou Xian was stunned. This was the first time he saw the woman in the plain dress smile. In his memory, this woman in the plain dress had never smiled before. The woman in the plain dress said softly, "In life, you need to experience these tribulations. Just like a sword, if it is not tempered thousands of times, it will not become a sharp sword. The tribulations you are experiencing now, one day in the future, you will be grateful for these tribulations." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. I am not afraid of tribulations. I am afraid that I will be accidentally killed by others. The woman in the plain dress smiled. Then work hard to become stronger. Only with great strength can you truly laugh at the world. Yi Xian looked at the woman in the plain dress. Why are you helping me? Did I know you in my previous life? Why did the woman in the plain dress help him? This was what he was most curious about. Ever since he met the woman in the plain dress, he could feel that the woman in the plain dress treated him differently. And he was very clear that the woman in the plain dress would not do this for no reason. There was only one explanation, and that was that the woman in the plain dress had something to do with him in his previous life. But what was the relationship between them? This made him very curious. The woman in the plain dress looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. He seemed to be in deep thought. Yi Xian said, "Can't you tell me?" The woman in the plain dress shook her head. "It is not that I can't tell you, but it is meaningless to tell you now. When you meet me in the future you will know many things." Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then asked again, "Where are you now?" The woman in the plain dress said softly, "A very far place." Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this time the king of the northern region, who was not far away, suddenly smiled and said, "Your Excellency, are you really not going to show up and fight?" The woman in the plain dress turned to look at the king of the northern region. "You want to fight me?" The king of the northern region laughed. "Could it be that I am not qualified?" The woman in the plain dress turned to look at Yi Xian. "Kill someone or kill the world?" Yi Xian was stunned. Kill someone or kill the world? Yi Xian's brain short-circuited. Chapter 688. Insta-kill him? Insta-kill the entire world? Yi Xian didn't quite understand what she meant, but it didn't take long for him to understand. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, "All the experts in the northern region above the Emperor realm. Make them disappear. Is that all right?" She nodded. Yes. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly gazed at the northern region king. "You aren't qualified to challenge me." The northern region king smiled. "Is that so?" She suddenly stretched out her right hand. Sword. As soon as her voice resounded, a sword howl suddenly resounded in the starry sky of the chaotic universe, and then a sword suddenly slashed down from the sky. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw the sword because it was the same sword that had been at the top of the pagoda. It was slashing straight towards the northern region king. The northern region king's pupils constricted when he witnessed this scene. At this moment he sensed the aura of death. The northern region king didn't dare act carelessly in the slightest. He suddenly clenched his fists tightly, and a powerful aura instantly swept out from within him. The space in an area of over 100 kilometers instantly started seething. The expressions of Yi Xian and the others instantly turned solemn when they witnessed this scene. The northern region king's strength was extraordinary. Meanwhile, the woman's sword had arrived above the northern region king's head. The northern region king revealed a savage smile as he suddenly smashed his fists upwards. Rumble. A powerful pressure instantly shook everyone to the point of retreating explosively. Meanwhile, the woman's sword descended. The sound of something slicing resounded. Everyone watched as the sword descended straight down, and it descended directly from the northern region king's head to the ground. The surroundings were deathly silent. He didn't block it. The northern region king's eyes gradually became slightly dazed, and it didn't take long for his body to start dissipating bit by bit. The expressions of everyone here became extremely solemn when they witnessed this scene. She instantly killed the northern region king with a single attack? Yi Xian was stunned as well. He knew that the woman was very strong and he knew that she would definitely win. But he hadn't imagined that she would actually kill the northern region king with a single attack. A single attack. That was the northern region king of the Sky-Earth world. He wasn't even able to resist a single attack? The people around the king of the northern region were completely petrified. His king couldn't even take a single strike. The northern region king looked at the woman in the plain dress. How is this possible? The plain-dressed woman glared at the northern region king coldly. She didn't say anything, but the way she looked at him was as though she was looking at an ant. Soon, the lady's gaze landed on the Night King and the old swordsman beside the northern region king. The old swordsman suddenly took a step forward. The sword in his hand suddenly trembled violently, and a surge of sword intent soared into the sky. The old man looked at the plain-dressed woman without any fear in his eyes. "Please enlighten me." The plainly dressed woman waved her hand. A ray of sword light flashed through the battlefield. A tearing sound resounded. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly transformed into a ray of light that vanished on the spot. Buzz! The sword cry shook the heavens and earth. But soon the battlefield became calm again, and a head slowly fell from the sky. It was the old man's head. It was an instant kill. The plain-dressed woman's face was expressionless. She glanced at the three enormous ships and then she pointed with a finger. The sword suddenly flew out, and then numerous shrill cries resounded incessantly from the three ships. In less than 3 breaths of time, the heads of all the experts at the Imperial Emperor realm and above had fallen to the ground. The scalps of the experts from the divine kingdoms went numb when they witnessed this scene. She killed experts at the Imperial Emperor realm and godly realm like chickens. Zhou Xian shuddered with fear as well. This plain-dressed woman is extraordinarily ferocious. Meanwhile, the plain-dressed woman's gaze descended onto the Night King. The Night King remained silent. He didn't attack as well because it was pointless. On the other hand, the Northern Region King had become completely illusory, and he was about to vanish from this world for good. The plain-dressed woman gazed at the Night King. "Where's the Northern Region King?" The Night King hesitated for a moment and then he pointed to the right. The plain-dressed woman gazed at the Northern Region King who hadn't completely vanished. "Watch carefully." As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed with a finger. "Sword, go." The plain-dressed woman's sword suddenly transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the distant starry sky. Everyone looked at the sword. The Northern Region King who hadn't completely vanished looked at the plain-dressed woman. "What are you going to do?" The plain-dressed woman remained expressionless and didn't speak. It didn't take long for the sword to arrive at the Northern Region King's territory. The expressions of all the experts in the Northern Region King's territory changed drastically when the sword appeared in the Northern Region King's territory, and countless people raised their heads to look at the sky above the capital city of the Northern Region. In the sky above the city, the sword slowly descended. As the sword fell, the royal city of the Northern Region began to crumble inch by inch. The Northern Region King's expression changed drastically. What are you going to do?" The plain-dressed woman glanced at the Northern Region King, and then she turned to look at Zhou Xian. "I'll show you a sword technique that descends from the sky." As soon as she finished speaking, she raised her hand and pressed it down lightly. The sword suddenly descended from the sky above the capital city of the Northern Region. Bang! The entire capital city of the Northern Region was instantly reduced to ashes. At the same time, countless screams rang out. Within the city, countless rays of sword chi slaughtered the experts at the Great Emperor realm and above in a frenzy. These people couldn't resist the sword chi at all. It was a massacre. In a short while, the entire capital city of the Northern Region was completely reduced to ashes. Many people in the city had already fled, but not a single expert at the Great Emperor realm or above had managed to escape. And that wasn't the end. The plain-dressed woman's sword suddenly trembled violently, and then countless rays of sword chi shot towards the sky. Wherever these rays of sword chi passed, experts at the Great Emperor realm and above were all killed. A massacre. It was a complete massacre. In the starry sky of the chaotic universe, the Northern Region King's mind went blank as he looked at the scene. He knew that at this moment, the Northern Region had completely disappeared from the Xuanhuan Great World. This was because all the experts at the Great Emperor realm and above had been killed by this plain-dressed woman. Although she hadn't completely annihilated everyone in the Northern Region, the Northern Region had now become an unrated force. The Northern Region King looked at the plain-dressed woman. "Who are you?" Now he only wanted to know who this plain-dressed woman was. He knew that he had provoked someone he shouldn't have. But who was this person? Logically speaking, he knew all the people of this level, but among the top experts of the Xuanhuan Great World, there was no one named this plain-dressed woman. The plain-dressed woman ignored the Northern Region King. With a wave of her right hand, the sword in the Northern Region suddenly flew back to the starry sky of the chaotic universe. At this moment, the Northern Region King completely disappeared. In the last moment of his disappearance, he was looking at the plain-dressed woman. The plain-dressed woman looked at the Night King. The Night King said in a low voice, "I can't beat you. He was once one of the most monstrous people in the northern region, and he had never admitted defeat to anyone in his life. But at this moment he decisively admitted defeat. If there was a god in the world, then this plain-dressed woman before him was a god. The plain-dressed woman was expressionless. "Do you want to live?" The Night King nodded. "Yes." The plain-dressed woman suddenly pointed with her fingers, and a ray of sword light directly pierced the Night King's forehead. But the next moment the ray of sword light flew out and finally landed in front of Zhou Xian. There was even a strand of black gas coiling around the ray of sword light. The plain-dressed woman turned to look at Zhou Xian, and her eyes were no longer as indifferent as before. "This is his soul. You can control his life and death by controlling this soul." Zhou Xian knew that the plain-dressed woman had found a goon for him. Zhou Xian didn't refuse, and he immediately put away the ray of sword light. At the same time he put away the Northern Region King's spatial ring as well. When he glanced at its contents, Zhou Xian couldn't help but laugh. "I'm rich." As if he'd thought of something, he gazed at the plain-dressed woman. The plain-dressed woman waved her right hand, and her sword descended in front of Zhou Xian. Zhou Xian asked, "What's this?" The plain-dressed woman said, "I'll leave this sword with you, but you're still unable to control it right now. I've hidden 3 strands of sword energy within it, and you can use it 3 times. You can use it in times of danger." Zhou Xian was delighted when he heard this, and he hurriedly put the sword away before he gazed at the plain-dressed woman. "Are you leaving?" The plain-dressed woman nodded. "I still have some things to do." As she spoke, she glanced at Zhou Xian with a rather complicated expression. "Your current strength isn't sufficient to protect yourself, and I can't be by your side at all times. So, you have to be careful at all times in the future." Zhou Xian nodded. "I will." The plain-dressed woman nodded lightly. "Take good care of yourself." As soon as she finished speaking, the screen of light in front of Zhou Xian gradually turned illusory. Zhou Xian knew that she was about to leave. Zhou Xian hurriedly said, "Where should I go to look for you in the future?" The plain-dressed woman gazed at Zhou Xian. "Wait until you're strong enough." As soon as she finished speaking, she vanished completely. "She's gone." Zhou Xian was silent. Once the plain-dressed woman left, he didn't know when they would meet again. After a while, Zhou Xian shook his head, no longer thinking about this problem. He looked at the soldiers of the northern region in the distance. Just now, the plain-dressed woman had only attacked the experts of Emperor Realm and above, so these soldiers were still alive. Seeing Zhou Xian's gaze, the soldiers' expressions changed, and they became incomparably vigilant. Zhou Xian walked in front of the soldiers. "You have 2 choices, surrender or die." "Surrender?" At this time a general walked out and he stared at Zhou Xian. "We are from the northern region." Zhou Xian suddenly raised his hand and swung his sword. The general's head flew off. Zhou Xian glanced at the crowd. "Is there anyone else with a backbone? Come out, I'll cut off his bones." The group of soldiers looked at Zhou Xian but didn't speak. Zhou Xian continued, "Think about your families. If you all die here, what will happen to them?" The crowd fell silent. Zhou Xian continued, "If you surrender to me, I can promise you that I won't touch your families, and I won't massacre the northern region." The crowd was still silent. Zhou Xian suddenly roared, "I don't have any patience." As soon as his voice fell, a sword's hum soared to the sky. At this time a soldier of the northern region walked out and he looked at Zhou Xian. "You won't massacre the northern region?" Zhou Xian was expressionless. "I'll keep my word." The soldier immediately knelt on one knee. "I'm willing to follow you." Soon more and more soldiers knelt. In the distant starry sky, the plain-dressed woman sat in front of a chessboard. After an unknown amount of time, the plain-dressed woman suddenly stood up, and she looked into the distant starry sky. "If he lives, you will live. If he dies, your 5th dimension will die. P.S. Go to Beijing today. Attend an event at the Beijing Art Creation International Convention and Exhibition Center the day after tomorrow, which is 2 p.m. on the 10th. Are there any friends from Beijing coming over to play? There should be a lot of gods here tomorrow. You can come over to see me. If there are any of my readers here, we can communicate. I can do any pose. If there aren't, may I ask, what's the usual rate for celebrities to ask their fans and actors to show off? How much for an hour? Do you know anyone? Introduce me to someone." At this point he suddenly felt a little sad. After so many years he still didn't have many loyal fans. If he had gone to mine coal back then, he might have become a coal boss. Chapter 689. The Chaotic Universe. Order City. Within the Divine Hall. Yi Xian sat on the throne. All the experts of the divine nation stood before him. At this moment, everyone within the hall was brimming with smiles. They'd won. The divine nation had won. Not only had they won, but they'd even absorbed the armies of the Northern Territory. It could be said that the divine nation was unprecedentedly powerful. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Everyone prepare yourselves. We're marching into the Northern Territory." They were marching into the Northern Territory. Everyone here was stunned when they heard this. Xianxia was slightly stunned as well. She hadn't expected Yi Xian to have such thoughts. Yi Xian spoke softly, "Everyone, the Dark Origin world won't let the matter rest." Meanwhile, Xianxia spoke solemnly, "With that senior here, would the Dark Origin world dare to attack us?" The woman in a plain dress. At this moment, the strength that the woman in a simple dress revealed was truly too terrifying. Yi Xian shook his head, "We can't place all our hopes on her." The woman in a plain dress was sufficiently strong, and her attack had absolutely awed the entire Dark Origin world. However, he didn't think that it could frighten the Dark Origin world. After all, it was the strongest place in the entire fourth dimension. At most, the Dark Origin world would fear the woman in a plain dress. Only those who had faced the plainly dressed woman would know how terrifying she was. Moreover, his intuition told him that the Dark Origin world would definitely not give up just like that. Moreover, he didn't want to place all his hopes on the woman in a plain dress. Yi Xian continued, "Everyone, we must march into the Northern Territory. Now that all the high-end forces in the Northern Territory have been annihilated, it's our opportunity. Only then can we set the battlefield in the Dark Origin world and not the chaotic world." Meanwhile, Elder One spoke solemnly, "The Dark Origin world is over there. We'll probably run into a lot of trouble if we head there just like that." Yi Xian smiled, "Why would we be afraid of trouble? Instead of waiting here for death, I'd rather take the initiative to attack. Moreover, the Northern Territory is so huge. Aren't you tempted by it?" Some of the people here were tempted when they heard this. The Northern Territory. That was the Xianhuang Great World. If they could gain a foothold there, it would bring them endless benefits. At this moment, an old man walked out. "My Lin family is willing to follow the Divine Master to the Black-Yellow Great World." Soon more and more people came forward. In the end, almost everyone was willing to follow Yi Xian to the Black-Yellow Great World. Benefits were the most motivating factor. Yi Xian nodded and said, "Everyone prepare yourselves. We'll be heading to the Northern Territory of the Sky-Earth world in 2 days." With that, he got up and left. Inside the hall, everyone was still discussing. Yi Xian returned to his room, sat down, and took out the Northern Region King's storage ring. There weren't many things in the storage ring, but they were all of the highest quality. Among them, there were a total of 6 God Realm treasures, and 2 of them were swords. Although these 2 swords were not as good as his Executing Heaven sword and Soul Suppressing sword, they were still top-notch swords. He could keep it and devour it, because in terms of swords he already had the Executing Heaven sword and Soul Suppressing sword. Moreover, there was now the addition of the plain-dressed woman's sword. He didn't lack swords to use, but he lacked swords that he could absorb. Apart from these 6 God Realm treasures, there was also an End Realm treasure. An End Realm treasure. One must know that the soul-suppressing sword was just at the End Realm. It was armor, a golden armor that gave off a golden glow. Qingqing Yi Family Ancestral Hall. Ancestor Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian will be removed from the position of prince and Yi Lang will take over. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a teen who had a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of the Yi Manor. "Why?" Just at this moment, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling and she was Yi Xian's sister. When she heard that the family wanted to remove Yi Xian, she didn't care about her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed towards the people in the ancestral hall and said timidly, Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince, so why did you trash him for no reason? The elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a family matter, so why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid and didn't dare to look at the elder, but she didn't leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders and said, Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li family over the mining rights at Nanshan. He's fighting for the family right now and we don't even know if he's dead or alive. Yet the family is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped of his position or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 guards of the Yi manor rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the family for so many years and even now he's fighting for the family. The family is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, Young master Yi Lang inherits the prince's position. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry. She just clutched her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yi Lang nodded, You're not bad. After I become the prince I'll need 10 personal guards. You can be my personal guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate will go through fire and water for the prince and I'll do anything for you. Yi Lang nodded, Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Do not hold back. Understood? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang and when he saw the killing intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this time Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, Your man? As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed, Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Qingqing Yi Clan Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides there were the Yi clan elders. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yiling and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yiling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yiling bowed to everyone in the hall as she asked timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yiling coldly. This is a matter of the clan, why are you butting in? Leave. Yiling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the Great Elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged. Whether he's crippled or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time the new prince Yilang suddenly laughed. He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, then flog him 30 times. Very quickly 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists and said angrily, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince Yilang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, Young Master Yilang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke he raised his hand and slapped Yiling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded and the right side of Yiling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry and only held her cheek tightly. Yilang looked at the guard and smiled. What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yilang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince I'll need 10 guards. From now on you'll be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. I'll go through fire and water for the prince and I'll do anything for you. Yilang nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang and when he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something and he suddenly stopped. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside the hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yilang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall the elders frowned. The Great Elder squinted his eyes and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yilang and was about to speak. At this moment Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Ping. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there and he charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time Yilang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh. Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man? As he spoke he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Ping. Chapter 690. Shangguan Xian, took Yi Xian to the temple. Inside the temple, Yi Xian saw the sects and families that had left before. These people had all chosen to leave on their own accord. Seeing Yi Xian, these people's faces were a little unnatural. Yi Xian looked at the crowd and said with a smile, "Why did you come back?" At this time an old man stood out. This person was the first to propose to leave, the sect master of Zhongshan sect, Lin Zongxing. Yi Xian had a deep impression of this old man because he was the first to propose to leave. Lin Zongxing bowed slightly to Yi Xian. "Divine Lord, we thought about it again and decided to come back." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Why?" Lin Zongxing said in a deep voice, "This is our home." Speaking of this, he looked at Yi Xian. "Moreover, now that the chaotic universe is in a desperate situation, we thought about it again and still feel that we should not leave at this time, so we decided to come back and face everything with the chaotic universe." Yi Xian suddenly laughed. He looked at Xianxia. "People say that I, Yi Xian, am thick-skinned, but now in front of Sect Master Lin, I feel that my face is really too thin." Lin Zongxing said in a deep voice, "Divine Lord, we are sincere." Yi Xian suddenly waved his hand, interrupting Lin Zongxing. "Sect Master Lin, why didn't you come back when the Northern Army came?" Hearing this, Lin Zongxing's face became a little ugly. Yi Xian looked at Lin Zongxing and others. "Sect Master Lin, I, Yi Xian, have no grievances with you. Why do you want to rub my intelligence on the ground?" Speaking of this, his face suddenly became cold. "Or do I look stupid?" Hearing this, Lin Zongxing and others' face changed. Lin Zongxing, the leader, hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Divine Lord, we absolutely did not mean that." He hesitated for a moment as he spoke, and then he said, We know our mistakes. We really shouldn't have left when the Divine Kingdom is in danger. Please give us a chance to turn over a new leaf." Yi Xian looked at Lin Zongxing. "If we can't go through thick and thin together, how can we share prosperity?" Hearing this, Lin Zongxing's face instantly turned pale. At this moment, Yi Xian started walking towards the exit. When he arrived at the entrance to the hall, he suddenly stopped and said, "Xian, make them immediately leave the chaos verse. Otherwise, treat them as enemies." With that, he disappeared into the distance. Xianxia's expression was quite strange, because Yi Xian's way of addressing her was different from before. "Xianer?" After a while, Xianxia looked at Lin Zongxing and the others. "Secret guards, send them away." With that, more than 20 shadow guards followed behind Lin Zongxing and the others. Seeing this scene, the faces of Lin Zongxing and others suddenly became extremely ugly. Xianxia didn't care about the crowd. She left the main hall. Just as Yi Xian said, "If we can't go through thick and thin together, how can we share prosperity?" Yi Xian returned to Divine Martial Arts City. In a room, Beizhe, Mo Yunqi and Jianji were in the room. The three of them were looking at Yi Xian. Yi Xian waved his right hand, and a pile of treasures appeared in front of the three of them. The lowest treasure was at the divine state level. Mo Yunqi looked at Yi Xian. "Bandit Yi, what are you doing?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Choose one of each." Mo Yunqi shook his head. "I don't want it." Yi Xian looked at Mo Yunqi. "Why?" Mo Yunqi said in a deep voice, "We want to rely on ourselves." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I know you want to rely on yourself, but this is my kind intention. You know me, I have no evil intentions, I just hope you can become stronger." Mo Yunqi smiled and said, "I know you have no evil intentions, At this moment, Beizhe, who was not far away, suddenly picked up a divine state-level treasure. He looked at the treasure in his hand and his eyes lit up. Good stuff. Jianji also picked up a treasure. He picked up a ribbon. This ribbon was completely blue and looked very beautiful. It was a defensive treasure. Seeing that both of them had taken it, Mo Yunqi's mouth twitched. He hesitated for a moment and then said, "Since you insist, I will not refuse." After saying that, he hurriedly picked up a treasure on the table. Yi Xian smiled and then took out 3 white jade bottles. "These are elixirs I got from the Black-Yellow Great World. They can improve your physique and aptitude, and can help you improve your cultivation." After saying that, he looked at the three of them. "Also, get ready, we are going to the Black-Yellow Great World." Mo Yunqi was stunned and then said, "To the Black-Yellow Great World?" Yi Xian nodded. Mo Yunqi hesitated for a moment and then said, "The three of us are a bit weak." Yi Xian said, "The stage there is bigger." Mo Yunqi fell silent for a moment and then he nodded, "All right." Yi Xian smiled. Do your best. I firmly believe that the day will come when we fight side by side, definitely. Mo Yunqi smiled bitterly. You are moving too fast. When they were at the state of Jiang, they were similar to Yi Xian. But now Yi Xian was moving further and further away, and the gap between them and Yi Xian was growing wider and wider. Yi Xian looked at the three of them and said softly, It isn't that I want to move fast, but this world is forcing me to move fast. This world is very cruel and you have to work hard as well. Only in this way can you control your own destiny. Mo Yunqi nodded. I know, we have been working hard all this time. Meanwhile, Xianxia suddenly said, I have already asked the Songlan Academy to come here. Songlan Academy. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia and said with a smile, This is a good thing. After they come, if there is anything you need, just let me know. Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. Are you still the dean? Yi Xian smiled. Of course. I have always been the dean of Songlan Academy. Xianxia nodded slightly. All right. After chatting with Xianxia and the others for a while, Yi Xian left the room and Xianxia followed him out. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. Let's walk together. Xianxia nodded. Yi Xian took Xianxia and strolled along a Shao Dao of the sword sect. Along the way there were swordsmen passing by from time to time, and these swordsmen would stop and salute when they saw Yi Xian. Sword sect. Nowadays, the sword sect's status in the entire chaotic universe had returned to its former transcendent status. Because everyone knew that the current god of God, Yi Xian, was the sect leader of the sword sect. Along the way, Yi Xian softly said, How have you been recently? Xianxia nodded. Very good. Saying so, she looked at Yi Xian. Have you thought about going back? Go back. Yi Xian was slightly startled, and then he shook his head with a bitter smile. Go back. He naturally knew where Xianxia was referring to. Firmament world. They all came from the firmament world. As for returning to the firmament world, he had never thought about it. It wasn't that he didn't want to go back, but he was too busy right now and there were too many things he had to face. At this time, Xianxia suddenly said, Do you have time to go back together? Yi Xian nodded slightly. Sure. With his current strength, if he wanted to return to the firmament world, it would be very fast. An hour later, Yi Xian and Xianxia parted ways. He went to the great hall of the sword sect. In front of the great hall stood a statue. The statue of an azure-robed man. On the shoulder of the azure-robed man sat a small white fellow. Of course, this was also a statue. As he looked at this statue, Yi Xian fell silent. Patriarch Sword Lord. In front of the statue, Yi Xian fell silent for a very long time. Finally, he turned and left. The next day, countless powerhouses of the chaotic universe boarded starships and set out for the Xuanhuan Great World. In the starry sky, Yi Xian stood on the head of the golden dragon. Beside him were Xian, and Jiangjiu. Under the Xuanhuan Great World. He hadn't made this decision on a whim. If he continued to stay in the chaotic universe, he would be a sitting duck. This was because he knew that the people of the Xuanhuan Great World would never let this matter rest. Thus he chose to go to the Xuanhuan Great World of his own accord. But it was also an opportunity. Because the northern region had just been destroyed, the people of the Xuanhuan Great World would definitely be afraid. As long as they were afraid, it would be his opportunity. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia beside him. How soon can we reach the northern region? Xianxia said in a low voice. The northern region has countless teleportation arrays in the starry sky. We can reach the northern region in 10 days at most. 10 days. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Pass down the order. After entering the northern region, no one is allowed to kill the innocent, rape or pillage. Anyone who dares to violate this rule will be killed without mercy. Xianxia nodded. I have already given the order. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia. She was a little nervous. Yi Xian smiled. Don't be nervous. I mean no harm. I'm just curious. Did you guess what I was thinking or? Xianxia said softly. No, it's just that our god nation has never slaughtered the weak. When we came out of the eastern wasteland world, we did not slaughter the weak. As she said this, she looked at Yi Xian. Moreover, I think that the Divine Lord's goal should be to develop the northern region, not to destroy it. Yi Xian smiled. You guessed right. Development. What he needed to do now was to develop and make the people around him stronger together. Xianxia said again. I am a little worried that the northern region has already been occupied. If it is occupied, what should we do? Yi Xian sneered. If it is occupied, then declare war. Declare war. Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. Declare war no matter who it is? Yi Xian nodded. No matter who it is, we declare war. Xianxia was puzzled. Why? When Yi Xian was about to speak, Jiang Jiu, who was next to him, suddenly said, because we can't back down now. Right now, everyone thinks there's a super strong person behind us. The more we back down, the less fear they'll have. And the more arrogant we are, the more they will hold back. So we have no way out now. No matter who is in front of us, we have to be firm to the end. The more firm we are, the more afraid they will be. Xianxia glanced at Jiang Jiu and did not speak. Yi Xian nodded. Arrogant. As he spoke, he looked towards the starry sky in the distance and said softly, I can't keep a low profile anymore. I want to be high profile. I want to be arrogant. I want to tell the people of the black-yellow great world that I have someone backing me. There's an expert. The two women. P.S. There will be an event at the Yichuang International Convention and Exhibition Center tomorrow. Those who are here can come and have some fun. Lastly, the ladies from Beijing were pretty. Brothers, can I go wild? Chapter 691. 5 days later. In the vast starry sky, Yi Xian stood on the head of the golden dragon. Behind him were the experts of the chaotic universe. Yi Xian looked at the end of the starry sky with a calm expression. This time he would bring the people behind him to a whole new world. The black-yellow great world. This was the most prosperous world in the four-dimensional universe. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly asked, Miss Ayu, have you come into contact with the black-yellow great world before? Ayu said, no. Yi Xian was about to speak when Ayu said, however, I've heard of them in the fifth dimension. This Xuanhuan great world has produced many outstanding people, and these people forcibly charged through the fifth dimension. Although they did not succeed, they were still terrifying. Yi Xian said in a low voice, I heard you say that one has to pass 3 tests to go to the fifth dimension. Is that right? Ayu said, yes. The four-dimensional universe and the five-dimensional universe aren't connected. There are too many things between the 2 dimensions. Yi Xian asked, what things? Ayu fell silent for a moment and then said, the dimensions of the 5-dimensional universe are completely different from the 4-dimensional universe. Whether it's in terms of space or time, it's not something that the people of the 4-dimensional universe can understand. There are actually 3 ways to enter the 5th dimension. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, which 3 ways? Ayu said, the first way is to forcefully break through the dimensional barrier between the 4-dimensional universe and the 5-dimensional universe. However, this isn't something that ordinary people can do. So far, among the experts of the 4-dimensional universe that I've met, only the 3 people at the top of the pagoda and the owner of this sword can do it. The 3 swords at the top of the pagoda. Yi Xian fell silent. He had come into contact with the owners of the 3 swords, but he didn't know their true strength. Just how strong were these 3 people? This had always been a mystery. At this moment, Ayu said, the second way is to cheat. Cheat? Yi Xian was stunned and then he asked, how do I cheat? Ayu said, you can cheat. You can enter the 5th dimension with this broken pagoda. Prison pagoda. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before saying, Miss Ayu, can I go to the 5th dimension now? Ayu said, sure. Yi Xian asked, how do we get there? What are you going to do? Are you trying to kill me? Yi Xian was speechless. Ayu continued, you can go in now, but the problem is, what about after you go in? Have you thought about it? Yi Xian smiled sheepishly. I didn't think about that. Ayu said, you can't even survive in the 4th dimension and you want to go to the 5th dimension? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. This Miss Ayu was good at everything, but she was ruthless with her words. Yu continued, there is another way to enter the 5th dimension. Yi Xian was a little curious. What method? Ayu said, knowledge. Yi Xian frowned. Knowledge? What do you mean? Ayu said, the 5th dimension's dimensions, Tao laws, time, space, matter, and so on are all different from the 4th dimension. If you people here can see through them and truly understand them, then you can enter the 5th dimension. However, as far as I know, there seems to be only one person in history who entered the 5th dimension using this method. Moreover, this person is a legend in our world and it's still unknown whether there is such a person or not. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, in other words, someone has entered the fifth dimension in the past, right? Ayu said, it's just a possibility. Yi Xian said, Miss Ayu, I've always been curious about why all of you appeared in the fourth dimension. Ayu fell silent. Yi Xian asked, can't you say it? Ayu said indifferently, there's nothing that can't be said. The reason we're here is because we escaped. Escaped? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Someone in the fifth dimension wants to harm all of you. Yu said coldly, it's not that someone in the fifth dimension wants to harm us, it's that this stupid pagoda is too stupid. Heavens! It's definitely the number one idiot in the fifth dimension. Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment the prison pagoda suddenly trembled as if it was protesting. Ayu said angrily, be quiet or I'll beat you to death. The prison pagoda was speechless. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. What did this prison pagoda do all those years ago? It actually made Yu so angry. Yu said coldly, this stupid pagoda isn't just an ordinary kind of stupid. It fell to its current state completely because of its own doing. If you don't do it you won't die. But it keeps doing it and it keeps dying. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Miss Ayu, what level is this Xiao Ta in the fifth dimension? Could it be that it has become a common street in the fifth dimension? The prison pagoda suddenly trembled in strong protest. Yu was silent for a moment and said, you don't have to worry about this. This stupid pagoda is a peak existence in the fifth dimension. Besides a sword and a scripture it has no opponents. Sword? Scripture? Yi Xian hurriedly asked, what sword? What scripture? Ayu said, I've never seen that scripture but I've heard of it. Supposedly, it's a general outline of the Grand Tao laws, and it contains 3,600 Grand Taos. As for its might I don't know. In any case it's as famous as this stupid pagoda. Yi Xian asked again, what about the sword? What sword is it? Yu said, the sword of eternal life. The sword of eternal life? Yi Xian asked, what does that mean? Yu said, according to legend this sword has the power of eternal life and you won't die if you hold it. That's why it's called the sword of eternal life. Yi Xian asked again, compared to the sword at the top of the pagoda, who is stronger? Yu suddenly said angrily, are you crazy? They haven't fought each other so how would I know who is stronger? Can you not ask such childish questions? Yi Xian was speechless. Yu was silent for a moment then said, the sword of eternal life isn't simple. It's not just a sword but also a symbol. Eternal life? Who in the world can live forever? Eternal life. Yi Xian was silent. Cultivation. The ultimate goal of all cultivators was to live a little longer. Could also be said that it was for eternal life. But could people really live forever? At this time Xianxia's voice suddenly came from the side. Divine Lord, look ahead. Yi Xian lifted his head and looked into the distance. There was a giant wheel there. A spatial stronghold. There were many powerful auras around this spatial stronghold. Clearly these people were the powerhouses of the northern region. Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he flew out. At this time an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The old man stared at Yi Xian. You're Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. It seems that you already know what happened in the chaotic universe. That saves me a lot of trouble. Surrender or die. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, don't be arrogant, old man. Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. A strand of light flashed. At the same time, a bloody head fell slowly to the ground. Yi Xian looked into the distance and said calmly, surrender or die. In the dark, the powerhouses didn't respond because they had already fled. Xianxia asked, should we chase? Yi Xian shook his head. No need. Let's go in. An hour later, everyone entered the wheel. The wheel activated and soon, everyone entered the spatial passage. In the spatial passage Xianxia looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyes were closed and no one knew what he was thinking. Xianxia retreated to Jiang Jiu's side and said softly, Miss Jiang, after arriving in the northern region I have an idea. Jiang Jiu looked at Xianxia. What idea? Xianxia said solemnly, after we arrive in the northern region, we will definitely encounter many challenges, and the big challenges can only be faced by God Masters. As for the powerhouses of our Scandinavia, their strength is still not enough. Therefore, I want to transfer some of Scandinavia's internal resources to these powerhouses. Jiang Jiu nodded. It's completely possible. Speaking of this, he looked at Xian. Are you a little nervous? Xian nodded. Scandinavia's treasury was originally abundant, but after we conquered the vast universe, we spent a lot. Although we still have some now, if we transfer it out, I'm afraid there will be a shortage of funds. Once there is a shortage of funds, it will affect the entire operation of Scandinavia. Jiang Jiu smiled. You want to ask him for money? Xian glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. Right now, the richest person in Scandinavia was undoubtedly Yi Xian. Super rich. Yi Xian also had the most treasures. However, she did not dare to ask Yi Xian, because those were Yi Xian's private finances. Jiang Jiu thought about it, then said, You can tell him directly. Xian smiled. Miss Jiang said it would be better. Jiang Jiu looked at Xian. Actually, he is very good and easy to talk to. However, his character is sometimes a little extreme. He asked me to come not to replace you, but to hope that you can understand that when he decides on something you can give suggestions, but it is best not to openly question his decision in front of outsiders. I believe that even the former Little Seven Divine Master did not like this kind of counselor. What do you think? Xian nodded. I know. Jiang Jiu smiled. I'll go talk to him. After speaking, she brought Xian to Yi Xian's side. Jiang Jiu was about to speak, but Yi Xian suddenly took out 5 white jade bottles and handed them to the 2 women. These are divine pills, pills that can help people advance from the Emperor realm to the God realm. There are only 10 of them. Choose 10 Emperor realm experts and help them advance to the God realm. Jiang Jiu said solemnly, Who do you choose? Yi Xian smiled. What do you think? Jiang Jiu nodded. Understood. Yi Xian took out another storage ring and handed it to the 2 women. There are 1 billion divine crystals in the storage ring. Give each of the 10 people 100 million, so that they do not have to worry about cultivation resources. As for the others, tell them not to worry. I will think of a way to get more divine pills. Strive to help our Emperor realm experts reach the God realm. Jiang Jiu nodded. Okay. The 2 women turned and left. Yi Xian looked up at the end of the distance. Black yellow great world. I am coming. At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared at the end of the spatial passage. The middle-aged man smiled. Black Yellow Lord asked me to welcome Divine Master Yi. Chapter 692. Black Yellow Lord? Yi Xian frowned. Black Yellow Great World's Lord? The middle-aged man nodded. Yes. Yi Xian smiled. You welcome me? The middle-aged man smiled slightly. Welcome to the Black Yellow Great World, Divine Lord Yi. Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. Thank you. The middle-aged man bowed slightly. Divine Lord Yi, you're welcome. I have conveyed my message, so I won't disturb you any longer. Goodbye. With that, he turned and disappeared at the end. Beside Yi Xian, Xian said solemnly, What are they up to? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. But they won't be so kind. Jiang Jiu nodded. Our top priority is to get to the northern region and figure out the entire Black-Yellow Great World. Yi Xian nodded. Pass down the order. Full speed ahead. Xian nodded and turned to leave. Beside Yi Xian, Jiang Jiu said solemnly, What are your plans after we get there? Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Those who are willing to make friends with us, we won't provoke them. But if anyone provokes us, we'll kill them. Jiang Jiu glanced at Yi Xian and shook his head with a smile. You're still so violent. Yi Xian looked into the distance and whispered, I have to be violent. This time I, Yi Xian, will tell everyone in the Black-Yellow Great World that I'm not easy to bully. Having said that, he seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly took out a Dao Realm sword and began to devour it. Cultivate. Strive to reach the Saint Realm. His biggest weakness now was that his realm was not high enough. The difference in realm was too great. The realm affected his divine soul and spiritual energy. The higher the realm, the stronger the divine soul and spiritual energy. And the stronger the divine soul and spiritual energy, the more powerful the sword skill he displayed. Especially the infinite sword. This sword skill also required a lot of divine soul and spiritual energy. Seeing that Yi Xian had begun to cultivate, Jiangjiu did not disturb him and quietly retreated. Just like that, Yi Xian absorbed sword after sword. 7 days later, Yi Xian, who was sitting on the golden dragon's head, suddenly opened his eyes. In his eyes, 2 rays of sword light flashed like lightning. At the same time, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body. Saint Realm. Yi Xian stood up and a breath of foul air floated out of his mouth. At this moment he felt that his divine sense and mental strength had become much stronger. It could be said that there was a qualitative change. At this moment he suddenly looked up and saw a white light not far away. Have we arrived? Everyone in the surroundings was looking at the ray of white light. Soon everyone disappeared in the white light. After a long time Yi Xian opened his eyes. At this moment they were above the clouds and below the clouds was a boundless mountain range. Beside Yi Xian, Xianxia said solemnly, "This is the territory of the northern region." Yi Xian scanned the surroundings and his expression quickly turned solemn. Spiritual energy. The spiritual energy here was so abundant that the chaotic universe could not compare to it at all. At this moment he knew why this place was known as the most prosperous world in the four-dimensional universe. With such abundant spiritual energy, the people here could be said to be blessed by nature. Not only Yi Xian but everyone present was also shocked by the spiritual energy here. This was simply a paradise for cultivators. Yi Xian turned to look at a soldier of the northern region not far away. "Where is the main city of the northern region?" The soldier pointed to the right. "It's over there." As he spoke he wanted to say something but hesitated. Yi Xian said, "What do you want to say?" The soldier looked at Yi Xian. "Divine Master, are you really not going to slaughter and plunder?" Yi Xian said calmly, "I will not let my people slaughter and plunder here. However, from now on I, Yi Xian, have the final say in the northern region. If anyone resists or disobeys I will definitely kill them." With that he lightly stomped his right foot, and the golden dragon turned into a beam of golden light and disappeared into the horizon. The soldiers of the northern region stood where they were, looking at each other in silence. No one dared to have any rebellious thoughts. This was because they knew how terrifying Yi Xian's strength was. More importantly, Yi Xian was backed by a woman in a plain dress who was as powerful as a god. These soldiers of the northern region who had seen the woman in a plain dress with their own eyes did not dare to have any rebellious thoughts. Moreover, Yi Xian was not a merciful person. About an hour later, Yi Xian and the others arrived at the royal city of the northern region. At this moment, the royal city of the northern region was already in ruins. Yi Xian naturally knew why this had happened. It must have been the doing of the woman in a plain dress. Yi Xian looked around, then looked at a soldier of the northern region beside him. "Where is the nearest city from here?" The soldier pointed to the front. 8,000 miles ahead there is a city called Tianjiang City. Although it is not as big as the royal city, it is not small either. Yi Xian nodded. "Go to Tianjiang City." With that he looked at the Celestial Arcanum sect leader not far away. "Send your people out to gather information. I want to understand the entire Shenhuang Great World." The Celestial Arcanum sect leader bowed slightly. "This subordinate understands." With that he turned and left. Yi Xian looked at Xianxia again. "Pass down the order again. Our people are not to kill the innocent, slaughter and plunder. As for the territory of the northern region, no one is to touch it." Xianxia nodded. "I will supervise." Yi Xian nodded. Now that he was in charge of the entire northern region, he was most afraid that his people would act recklessly. Many people were greedy, and the northern region was obviously much wealthier than the chaotic universe. Under such circumstances, he was afraid that his people would act recklessly out of greed. An hour later, Yi Xian led the group to Tianjiang City. Tianjiang City was located next to a huge river. This river was like a giant dragon that coiled around Tianjiang City. Behind the river was a stretch of towering mountains. The gates of Tianjiang City were tightly shut. Inside the city, Yi Xian felt some auras. However, none of these auras exceeded the Emperor Realm. Obviously, all the Emperor Realm and above experts of the northern region had been killed by the plain-dressed woman. With a leap, Yi Xian arrived at the gates of Tianjiang City. On top of the gates stood some northern region soldiers. Yi Xian walked up to the city gate. He raised his hand and brandished the sword. The city gate crumbled in an instant. Not far in front of Yi Xian stood an 11 or 12-year-old girl. This girl looked 60 to 70% similar to the king of the northern region. Behind the little girl there were hundreds of soldiers. At this time, a northern region soldier walked to Yi Xian's side. Lord God, she is the king of the northern region's only daughter. The king of the northern region's daughter. Yi Xian looked at the girl. You want to kill me? The girl glared at Yi Xian. You killed my father. Yi Xian smiled. If I don't kill him, he will kill me. The girl looked at Yi Xian. I know I can't beat you. Yi Xian smiled. Then why are you still here? The girl looked at Yi Xian. I won't leave. Yi Xian walked up to the little girl and pressed his sword against the little girl's forehead. However, the little girl showed no fear. She just looked at Yi Xian. All around, the northern region soldiers' faces changed. Some wanted to attack but didn't dare. The king of the northern region was very popular in the northern region. Yi Xian suddenly sheathed his sword. He smiled. I won't kill you. What happened between your father and me is between men. Of course, I know that if he wins he will probably kill everyone around me. But I won't kill you. Do you know why? The girl looked at Yi Xian and didn't say anything. Yi Xian smiled. In my opinion, the things between men shouldn't involve their wives and children. With that, he was already behind the girl, walking towards the distant Tianjiang city. Seeing this, Xian and Jiang Jiu breathed a sigh of relief. If Yi Xian killed this girl, all the northern region soldiers present would undoubtedly resent him and they might even rebel. Because before Yi Xian came, he said that he wouldn't kill them. If Yi Xian killed this girl, he would lose the support of the northern region. Moreover, these soldiers would feel threatened. If Yi Xian didn't even spare this girl, then what about their families? Now that Yi Xian didn't kill the girl, many of the northern region soldiers heaved sighs of relief. Not far away, the girl stood there in silence. At this time, an old man appeared beside the little girl and said softly, Your Highness Zhen, let's go. The girl was expressionless. How strong is he? The old man hesitated for a moment. No one in the northern region can fight him. There wasn't a single great emperor in the northern region right now. How could they fight against Yi Xian? The girl turned to look in the direction Yi Xian had left then walked away. Along the way, the soldiers from the northern territory saluted the little girl, but the little girl ignored them. Not far away, Xianxia glanced at the girl and asked softly, Should I make her disappear? Jiang Jiu shook his head. No need. Xianxia said softly, This person has rallying power. I'm afraid she'll become a disaster in the future. Jiang Jiu smiled. It's better for us if she's alive, because this will let the northern region know that we aren't cruel people. What we need now is to win over the hearts of the people, and keeping her alive is the best way to win them over. As for whether she'll become a disaster in the future. At this point, she looked in the direction Yi Xian had left and said softly, As long as nothing happens to him, she'll never be able to cause any trouble. Xianxia nodded. Understood. Jiang Jiu said, Let's go. We'll be busy soon. With that, the two women led the chaotic universe's powerhouses towards Tianjiang City. After entering Tianjiang City, Yi Xian constantly looked around. He had to admit that the architecture of the Xuanhuan Great World really couldn't be compared to the chaotic universes. This place was far more developed than the chaotic universes. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped in his tracks. He turned around and saw an old man in a white robe standing not far to his right. He didn't know when this white-robed old man had appeared. Yi Xian was expressionless. He held his sword in his right hand and didn't speak. The white-robed old man looked at Yi Xian. We want to see your master. Yi Xian, P.S. Poor. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.